Mated to the alpha who shouldn't love me. A werewolf shifter romance audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1. The Thorn at His Neck. The sound of glass striking glass rang through Winhold Court like a brutal war cry. It was meant to be a celebration. Under the vaulted heights of the Mirror Hall, where arc lanterns hung in perfect symmetry and 1,000 reflections danced like shallow ghosts across the polished marble, nobles whispered behind gilded veils. Silk rustled. Toasts echoed. Gold shimmered. And then the wind prince collapsed. At first, it was subtle, a tremor in the silver of his goblet, his fingers stiff at the stem. But then he stood too abruptly, his chair screeching backwards, and every window in the hall cracked at once with an unholy sound like the shattering of stars. His breath hitched. 1 step. 2. Then came the scream. Not his. Not human. Not any one voice. It was all voices. The entire palace was howling inside his skull. Aerenya Thornvane had not been meant to enter the hall so soon. She stood behind the partition, still clothed in courier gray, her packed stabilizer insignia only half pinned to her chest. The steward beside her muttered nervously, this wasn't scheduled. Emotion suppression teams weren't deployed yet. Then the scream came again. Louder. Ragged with something animal. The wind outside cracked open a shutter. No one moved. Except her. At the center of the Mirror Hall, Prince Sylrien Iskarreth stood hunched forward, one hand clawed into the table, the other pressed to his temple. Eyes wide. Amber pupils split and pulsing, veins beneath the skin of his throat casting silver veins like bleeding moonlight. His body shuddered, muscles shifting beneath brocade as if some greater shape clawed to surface from beneath his skin. The nobles had backed away. Guards circled uncertainly. And from the top of the grand stair, the high consort spoke. Do it. A whisper, but with the strength of a verdict. The steward nodded toward Aerenya. You're up. She did not answer. She did not need to. Stepping into the Mirror Hall was like plunging into an ocean of silence that knew how to scream. Aerenya walked slowly, deliberately. Her boots echoed on the glass-polished floor. No one stopped her. No one dared. The crowd watched a storm rip apart their prince's body from the inside, his gift rebelling, his blood screaming, and into the storm walked a girl wrapped in gray. Aerenya did not announce herself. She stepped through the ring of guards. She passed Sylrien on the stairs. She walked until she stood directly in front of the prince. He had collapsed to one knee by now, trembling, sweat beading down his temples, jaw clenched as if holding back 1,000 words, or the shape of something much worse. His breath was ragged. Her own heartbeat pounded, not from fear but resonance. She could feel it before she touched him, the storm beneath his skin. The core of his pain like a siren song. Familiar. Dangerous. Calling. She reached out. Someone gasped. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, just above his heart. A crackle of energy arced between them, silver and red and blinding. His eyes flew open. And so did hers. The shared pain was immediate and absolute. Aerenya's breath caught as a fire unfurled beneath her ribs, her limbs locking with 1,000 screams not her own. She felt his fury, his grief, his beast struggling against the cage of his bones. But she gave it something else. Her pain. Aerenya didn't suppress it. She fed it to the bond, a tether forged in blood and scar, and something far older than either of them. And it worked. The scream stopped. The wind died. The light in the Mirror Hall dimmed as if exhaling relief. Prince Sylrien sagged forward, catching himself just before falling. His hands shook. His eyes, now merely amber gold, blinked slowly. He looked up at her. And in the brief stillness that followed, as the nobles held their breath and the court prepared to restart the heartbeat of ritual and control, he whispered, hoarse and confused, "Who are you?" Her fingers were still on his chest. She did not answer. His gaze flicked to her hand, then to her face. "Why does your pain feel like it's older than mine?" He was lucid now. and exhausted. But there was something else there. Recognition. Not memory. Resonance. Aerenya slowly lowered her hand. Behind her, the High Consort's voice returned, smooth as silk soaked in wine. "Well done," Sylrien said, clapping softly. "You've stabilized the packed core. For now." Aerenya stepped back. Sylrien's eyes tracked her. He did not speak again. Later, the court resumed its rituals. Wine was poured. The broken glass was swept. But the prince had not remained. He had left the hall wordlessly, supported by no one. And Aerenya had remained behind, until— "Stay," a voice commanded. All eyes turned. The voice had come from the grand stair. Prince Sylrien Iskarreth stood once more. He was no longer trembling. He was standing straight. And his eyes were locked on her. Everyone. Out. Gasps. Protest murmurs. But one motion of his hand, and the guards obeyed. Nobles shuffled out. Only the High Consort hesitated, lips parted, but she smiled and left with an elegant tilt of her head. The hall emptied. Only two remained. She did not look at him as he descended the stair. She did not move when he stepped into her space. And she did not flinch when his fingers lifted her chin. They were cold. And shaking. But strong. His eyes were brighter up close. Less human. The mark at his throat, faint, silver, half faded, glowed under his skin. "What did you just do to me?" he asked. Aerenya's lips parted. She still said nothing. He studied her. Not her beauty. Not her face. But her silence. Her stillness. The kind of stillness only someone who had buried too many things inside could wear like armor. "You're not afraid of me," he said. Still she did not answer. And then his eyes narrowed. The mark beneath his skin pulsed once. Wait. His fingers dropped from her chin, but not before brushing her jawline, where her own scar, thin, silvery, glowed faintly in response. He stepped back once, gaze scanning her from boots to brow. "You're not palace-born." Silence. "You're not even wind-marked." Nothing. "But your pain." He inhaled, and the air turned sharp. His pupils dilated. "You're—" He stopped. Closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were entirely gold. No whites. No pupils. Just wolf. "Who the hell are you?" Chapter 2. Blood in the Breathless Garden. The Breathless Garden was never meant for screaming. It was a sanctum of silence, sealed beneath Windhold's northern quarter, domed in golden glass and veined with black iron. Vines bloomed upside down along its curved ceiling like the veins of a breathing beast, and the air shimmered faintly with alchemical vapor. It was always warm here. Always quiet. Always controlled. Until now. The door hissed shut behind Aerenya Thornbane. She said nothing as she stepped inside, boots brushing across soft moss that glowed faintly beneath her steps. Around her, the medicinal fog pulsed, shifting in color and scent. Sweet one second, sharp the next. This was where Windhold tested the hearts of its heirs. This was where emotion could be measured, broken open, tamed. Aerenya had no intention of being tamed. She walked toward the center of the room, the mist swallowing her shoulders. The collar of her gray coat was damp with condensation. Already her breathing slowed. Already her body responded to the garden's influence, slight warmth along her spine, pulse narrowing. The plants didn't soothe. They stripped. The voice that greeted her was colder than the mist. "Turn around." Aerenya did. Prince Sylrien Iskarreth stood across the fog-ring circle, arms crossed loosely, the light catching the sharp line of his jaw, the glint of silver threading his hair. His eyes were not gold now, they were pale and cold, silver gilt. "I don't remember agreeing to this," he said. Neither did she. But orders were orders, and when the High Consort sent you into the mist, you did not ask why. Sylrien stepped forward, the vines parting like breath around him. "Emotional recalibration," he muttered. Such a clinical word for letting strangers inside your skull. Aerenya didn't answer. She rarely did. He circled her once, slowly. You were the one from last night. Still nothing. She didn't even give you a name. The prince exhaled. The fog caught the warmth of his breath and made it bloom. Then he stopped in front of her, gaze steady. Do you speak? She nodded once. Then say something. Aerenya tilted her head. There is no need. He blinked. And then he laughed. Not loud. Not cruel. Just a dry exhale that seemed carved from disbelief. You don't fear me. You don't flatter me. And you think you can stabilize a packed fracture without even speaking. A beat passed. I don't know whether to pity you or kill you. She stepped forward. That stopped him. I will not touch your thoughts, she said quietly. Not unless you touch mine first. His smile faded. Silence bloomed between them like smoke. Then he lifted his hand. Aerenya mirrored him. Their fingers didn't touch, only hovered close enough to complete the loop. The fog thickened, light shivered, and the vines above them began to hum, low and pulsing. The resonance had begun. At first, it was simple. A ripple. A flicker. His rage, her silence. His chaos, her stone. The bond began like it always did, a test of pressure, a measurement of pulse and pain thresholds. Then the breach opened. Something cracked in the weave between them. Aerenya felt it first. His memory surged, a battlefield of voices, echoes of loyalty and betrayal. Sharp pains spiked through rib and spine, the sound of someone dying too far to save. She inhaled sharply. But it didn't stop. It went both ways. Because Sylrien flinched. And then he staggered back. What is this? He snarled. His body was locked rigid, fists trembling at his sides. His eyes had lost their gleam. Now they were wide, dilated, frantic. The mist twisted, turning reddish at the edges. I didn't give you permission, he ground out. What the hell is this? His voice cut off. And then came the memory. Not his. Hers. He saw. Ash. A burning house. A girl's shadow kneeling beside someone no longer breathing. A hand clutching another, burned at the edges. A name carved into a stone and crossed out. A blade. And blood. And the choking knowledge of being left behind. Stop, he whispered, a tremor in his voice. Stop. She couldn't. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, the link frayed. And Aerenya screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even a sound. But her body collapsed. She dropped to her knees, both hands to her chest as if to hold her ribs together. Blood pooled at her lips. The mist reacted violently, veins of red-violet bursting across the vines, the air humming discordant like a harp strung wrong. Outside the chamber, warning sigils flared. Inside, Sylrien stared at her, frozen. She shook, shivered, coughed blood again. Then her voice, raw, a whisper torn from splintered lungs, spoke. Please, don't look at me. Sylrien's hands flexed at his sides. He wanted to reach out. He didn't. Instead, he took a single step back. The vines above them curled tight. The mist turned blue again. And the connection broke. Later, when the medical envoys arrived, Aerenya had already cleaned her own blood and bound her own ribs. She refused the healers. Refused the psych dampers. Refused to explain why the prince had fled the chamber and slammed the door behind him. Sylrien watched it all from her private mirror, seated in the high tower overlooking the breathless garden. She sipped her tea. Smiled faintly. To think, she murmured, two hearts so destined to die, could still find a way to poison each other first. That night, Sylrien did not sleep. He sat alone in his study, staring into the mirror above his desk. Not at himself, but at the thing he held in his hands, a tattered book bound in iron leaf, sealed with old packed wax and barely legible sigils. He brushed the dust away from the front. A name lay burned into the cover. Binding, Sylrien Iskarreth. The rest was gone. Eaten by time. Or fire. His eyes narrowed. His pulse spiked. And in the stillness, he whispered, "Her pain is my name." Chapter 3: The Pact Without a Name. The library of Iskarreth did not smell of paper, but of iron and ink and memory too old to die. It was carved into the roots of the palace, deep, circular, windowless, and warded so heavily even light had to ask permission to exist there. Shelves curved like the rings of an ancient tree, hundreds of rows of ancestral binding documents wrapped in dust-sealed coils. Pact records. Blood-inked oaths. Memory-locked scrolls that could only be opened with a name, a drop of matching blood, and sometimes, less visibly, a scream. Sylrien Iskarreth stood in the heart of it all, not moving. His gloves were off. He held a fragment of parchment between his bare fingers, the edges singed, the ink faded to a bruised gray. His jaw was locked, his breathing even. And yet the air around him pulsed. The sigils etched into the library walls flared at intervals, as if sensing the disturbance beneath his skin. Council scribes waited in the shadows, silent, hands tucked in ceremonial sleeves. One of them dared to speak. "Your Highness, that particular scroll was not recorded." "No," Sylrien said flatly. "It wasn't." He looked down again. The seal was real, thornroot origin, with bone and ash binding residue. The date aligned with the timeline of the first rift suppression. The signatory field was blank. But the recipient? Thorn, he read aloud. No second name. No heraldic markings. No corresponding registry. And yet this pact was executed. A whisper passed through the scribes. "This is illegal," one murmured. "Or forgotten," said another. Sylrien didn't look at them. He touched his thumb to the seal. It sizzled. For a breathless second, the old contract flared to life, and in the ghost ink beneath the top layer, one line blinked visible. "For the one who bleeds unnamed. For the dead maid vessel. Her name shall bind no one, but her pain shall bind all." He did not speak again for several seconds. Then, low and sharp, "Find me her name." The scribes hesitated. Sylrien turned. Slowly. The power in his eyes was colder than steel. "I said, find me her name." One of them bowed low. "Aerenya Thornvane. Recently entered Win hold records under orphan provision from the Southern Wind Sanctum. No family, no crest, no known sponsor. And before that? No answer." "Exactly." Sylrien exhaled, a sound like wind curling through iron gates. "Nothing." As if she didn't exist. He held the scroll again. Faint blood from his finger had already smudged one edge. The pact accepted it. Reacted to it. That was what disturbed him most. Not that she had no name, but that the pact seemed to recognize his. Elsewhere, in the marble-veined hall of Wind Judges, High Consort Sylrien Iskarreth smiled over a porcelain teacup and said in the softest, most charming voice imaginable, "You're quite the mystery, Miss Thornvane." Aerenya stood several paces away, chin lowered, posture correct, every inch the obedient civic functionary she was pretending to be. "Your file is, how should I say it, pleasantly blank," Sylrien continued. "A blank page is a useful thing. Easy to overwrite. Easier still to burn." Aerenya remained silent. "Oh, don't misunderstand," the consort added brightly, setting her cup down with a soft clink. "I admire strength. And you've shown remarkable fortitude. Stabilizing a fractured crowned pact? That takes talent. Or desperation. Or both. A beat. You've tasted His Highness's resonance. You've walked through the gates of his pain. Tell me," she leaned forward, her smile still razor smooth. "Did you enjoy what you saw?" "I don't remember," Aerenya answered, calm. "A lie. Sylrien saw it." The consort stood and drifted closer, all white silk and swaying shadow. "Let me give you a small gift of advice, since we're both creatures of silence. The prince's mind is not yours to touch. Not even by accident. Not even to soothe. His pain is his crown. His madness is the leash we gave him." Aerenya did not flinch. But her fingers, hidden in her sleeves, curled tight. "You were sent to serve the kingdom," Sylrien whispered, just beside her ear now. Not to be remembered. Don't forget that. And then she was gone, as if she had never existed. Outside the chamber, Aerenya walked alone. She did not stop. She did not run. But the moment she reached the corridor's bend, she braced herself against the cold stone and coughed. Once. Twice. A third time, and blood splattered onto her glove. She wiped it quickly, fingers trembling. The echo of the prince's voice had not left her. That memory, what she'd shown him, what he'd felt, it wasn't supposed to breach the pact. She had control. She always had. Until him. Now, even silence hurt. That night, Sylrien sat in the shadows of the eastern tower, contract page laid out before him. Rain danced across the windows like bones on glass. He read the faded script again. Sylrien Iskarreth. And then, beneath it, in the very last ghost line of pact law, nearly erased. To name the dead substitute, one must pay in love. Only through agony can her name be sealed. His hands curled. His throat felt tight. He did not understand what she was. But he knew what she wasn't. A tool. An accident. A mere stabilizer. No. She was a thorn in his pact. And somehow he could feel. She would be the last. Chapter 4. Echoes Beneath the Spine. The chamber beneath Bone Hall Observatory was older than the crown that ruled Winhold. It was said to be carved from the ribs of the first wolf, a fossilized echo chamber beneath the mountain palace, where bone-remembered breath and stones could still speak names if broken correctly. There was no warmth here. No wind. Only silence and the weight of waiting things. Sylrien stood in the center of it, his arms bare, collar undone. The sigil at his sternum pulsed faintly beneath his skin, its lines tugged tighter with each measured breath. Above him, the bone-glass orb of the soul mirror hovered, its veins twitching like a living eye. "The prince is ready," announced the ritualist. Wheeler, archseer of the Bone Order, descended the final stair. His face was shrouded, save for the sharp mouth that never seemed to smile. He carried no blade. He didn't need one. He had the mirror. And the girl. Aerenya Thornvane was already being strapped into the Echo Arch. It wasn't a violent act, just cold, practiced. Leather across wrists. Ankles. A copper circlet gently laid against her brow. She hadn't spoken since entering. Not once. Sylrien had watched it all with unnerving stillness. Only his eyes betrayed him. Those gold-ringed wolf's eyes never left her. Wheeler turned to him. "Your Highness," he intoned, "today's test is not of your sanity, but your threshold." Sylrien's voice was a blade. "Get on with it." Wheeler raised one withered hand. "Begin Phase 1. The soul mirror flashed. A silent, deep frequency thrummed through the chamber. The sigils along the wall blazed to life, bone pale and blood bright. Aerenya's back arched first. Not violently. Just enough for her breath to stutter. The arch latched deeper into her spine, activating the shared frequency. Her pupils contracted. And Sylrien felt it. Not a memory. Not hers. A collision. He was standing in a burning street, the ground cracked open, the air filled with the shrill whistle of metal and screams. A child's hand, small and shaking, reached for a name carved in stone just before the flames took it. Faces blurred. Smoke. Ash. And a single line of chanting in a dead language. "No name. No name. No name." He gasped. The mirror pulsed harder. Wheeler's lips moved silently as he tuned the device, adjusting its resonance. "Her pain is affecting the prince's range," muttered one of the scribes. "Impossible," said another. "He's the anchor." But Sylrien had gone still. Too still. Then, suddenly, he stepped forward. Aerenya. She didn't move. Her face was drenched in sweat, jaw clenched, the cords of her throat pulled tight, as if she were screaming without sound. Her body shook once. Again. "Enough." Sylrien barked. "End it." Wheeler didn't move. "She has not reached equilibrium." "I said end it." Still, The seer did not obey. And then Sylrien's pupils shattered into gold. The mirror cracked. Veins of gold exploded across the bone dome, and the air warped. A low snarl filled the chamber, deep, guttural, not fully human. "Don't," he growled, voice breaking. "Don't touch her again." Guards stepped back. The nearest scribe dropped his notes. Wheeler lifted his head, brows furrowing beneath the hood. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Emotional integrity collapse at under 4 minutes. No lunar trigger. Fully reactive. This is the beginning." Sylrien didn't hear him. His claws were out. Not just metaphorically. Real claws. He tore the buckles from Aerenya's bindings in one motion, pulling her free from the arch as her breath wheezed out of her lungs. She sagged against him, barely conscious, her fingertips twitching like the strings of a torn instrument. Her nervous system, one healer started. "Get away from her," Sylrien hissed. He carried her to the edge of the circle and laid her down carefully, brushing the damp hair from her brow. Her lips were cracked with blood. Her pulse thready. She opened her eyes, just barely. She tried. He knelt beside her, forehead nearly touching hers. "I told you not to take more of my pain," she whispered, shaking. "I came to take yours." "You already did," he murmured, voice breaking. "You took it when no one else would." She coughed, weak. "Don't protect me." "You saved me," he whispered. "Once. In that hall. You walked into the storm when everyone else ran." Her fingers fumbled weakly over his hand, seeking. He caught them. "And from that moment," he said, "you became mine to deal with. My silence. My burden." Her lashes fluttered. Then her hand went still. But she was breathing. Sylrien stood. Slowly. His claws retracted, but his eyes stayed wolf gold. Wheeler watched him with growing interest. "You triggered without a moon. That's unprecedented." "You used her." She agreed. "She was ordered," Sylrien snapped. Wheeler's tone remained calm. "The result is undeniable. She is not simply compatible with you. She is reactive. Catalytic." Sylrien's voice was deathly low. "Say that again, and I'll test your bones for fragility." He scooped Aerenya into his arms, her body limp but warm. She did not stir. Wheeler made no move to stop him. "Take her," he said softly. "But remember, Prince, no pact echoes without a name." And some names were never meant to be spoken. Later that night, High Consort Sylrien stood in the observatory, watching the fracture lines crawl down the soul mirror's face. Wheeler stepped up beside her, unhood now, revealing skin the color of old parchment and eyes like hollow steel. "You saw it?" he asked. "Yes. They're not just bonded. She's displacing." Sylrien's lips curved. "If she's the substitute." Wheeler finished for her, voice thin as a crack in ice. "Then we've all stepped into a misnamed echo." Chapter 5: A Kiss Meant to Kill. The North Spire barracks slept beneath a sky of stone. By royal order, the outer torch lines were dimmed. No guards patrolled past the midnight hour. No wheels echoed on the bridges. Only the sound of distant wind, pushing through the joints of the ancient towers, reminded the halls they still breathed. But inside one transport bay, a carriage was being prepared in secret. Its crest bore no sigil. Its escort wore no colors. Only one figure stood in uniform, white-cloaked, silver-sashed, eyes like cold fire. Princess Sylrien Iskarreth. Her expression was still as frost as she watched the healers finish strapping the silent girl into the transport seat. Aerenya Thornvane didn't speak. Didn't resist. She sat with her wrists unbound, but her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if that silence was a surrender offered long before the carriage was summoned. Lyra's fingers tightened behind her back. "You don't belong here," she said, not unkindly. "You knew this would happen. You are disrupting his containment cycle. You're a variable." Still, Aerenya said nothing. Lyra studied her. "Do you think silence makes you holy? Or harmless?" No answer. A sharp exhale left the princess's lips, but before she could signal the driver, the ground shook. Not an earthquake. Not thunder. A singular impact. Like the palace spine had been struck by a god. The front of the transport groaned. The wheels froze mid-turn. And then, a hand curled around the axle. Tendrils of wind spiraled outward from a single figure standing in the center of the courtyard. Cloakless. Sleeves rolled. Eyes lit with fury. "Is this how we treat residents now?" Sylrien Iskarreth asked, voice low and sharp. Lyra stepped forward immediately. She was unstable. "I made a judgment call." "You made a mistake," he said. "That's not an echo. That's part of my spine you're trying to remove. She's hurting you. She's stabilizing me. She's an outsider. She's mine." The last word cracked the night like lightning. Even the guard stepped back. Aerenya looked up then. Just once. And in her eyes, something flickered, not relief, not hope, but something that hadn't been there for years. Hesitation. Lyra stared between them, eyes narrowing. Then she stepped back. "Then she's your risk to manage." She disappeared into the wind. They said nothing as he led her back through the east gate. The guard at the door paled, but no one stopped them. He didn't ask where she thought she was going. She didn't ask why he came. Silence wrapped around them tighter than any binding could. They stopped at the highest point of the observation tower, where only one broken telescope leaned against the stars, and the air was clean enough to hurt. The door shut behind them. And still, he didn't speak. He simply turned toward her, waiting. And she stepped into him. Not gently. Her hands fisted in his shirt, her breath ragged, her eyes wild with something that didn't know whether it was grief or desire. And she kissed him. Or nearly did. The distance between them collapsed, but not entirely. Because the steel kissed first. A blade, drawn between one heartbeat and the next. Its edge glinted cold against the starlight, pressed lightly against the base of his throat. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. He only looked at her. Her mouth trembled. Her hand holding the dagger shook. And the kiss never came. Instead, she dropped her forehead against his chest and let out a single, shattered breath. "I was supposed to do it," she whispered. "Tonight. Before your next wolf state. I was supposed to finish the control insertion." "Then why didn't you?" he asked. "Because you," her voice cracked. "You made me hesitate." Sylrien reached up slowly, carefully, and wrapped his hand around hers, guiding the dagger down. "If you still need to do it," he said, "then do it." She looked up at him, eyes red, pupils blown wide with pain and confusion and shame. "But don't cry while you do." Her breath hitched. "I wasn't crying," she said, voice barely audible. He leaned down, his forehead brushing hers. "No," he said, "but you stopped breathing." She closed her eyes. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, erratic, frantic. Her hand holding the blade dropped. His fingers caught it mid-fall. They stood like that for a long time, the storm between them neither breaking nor passing. And in the silence, for just one moment, it almost felt like peace. Far below, Lyra watched from the inner courtyard balcony, arms folded against the cold. A sentry approached, but said nothing when he saw her expression. She stared up at the tower window, where a single light still burned. "He was never supposed to find her," she whispered. The wind caught her words and tried to carry them away. She was never supposed to feel enough to stop. She closed her eyes. "She's not the executioner." A beat. "She's the one they sent me to replace." Chapter 6, Pact Breaker's Offer. The first thing Aerenya knew was cold stone under her knees. The second was silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence. Silence that watched. Silence that waited. She opened her eyes. The world around her was ash-hued, smeared with memory. 100 pale threads curled in the air like dying vines, swaying from an unseen wind. She knew this place, though she had never seen it. Its scent was old blood and unspoken oaths. Its breath tasted of iron and regret. She was inside the dream bastion, the domain of the deepest shared emotion, a tethered mind space reserved only for those whose packed resonance had begun to breach its limits. Which meant she wasn't alone. A flicker moved at the edge of the smoke. And then he stepped out. Wheeler. Not the hooded arch-seer from the observatory, but something more ancient, more serpentine. His voice came from every direction and none. Do you know where you are, child of the thorn? Aerenya slowly rose to her feet. Her hands were bare. Her clothes were wrong, ceremonial white, sleeveless, the fabric brittle with something dry and burned. The mark at her wrist, the one she kept hidden beneath leather, was flaring dimly. The seal of a pact not written in her name. What is this? She asked. Your spine, Wheeler replied, echoing itself. He gestured, and the ash swirled. A dome unfurled around her, carved of familiar ruins and unfamiliar memories. An altar. Stone carved in circles. Figures in crimson veils kneeling. And a single girl, hair in braids, lip bloodied, arms bound behind her back. Aerenya froze. She knew that girl. It was herself. You weren't offered, Wheeler said calmly. You were given. A body offered to the Thorn Pact in place of the one who ran. The scene shifted. Now the veiled priests were lifting her, little Aerenya, toward a stone cage, symbols burning against her skin as if her bones had become paper for something to sign. They called it salvation. A fragment of controlled empathy. A weapon that weeps only when commanded. But they lied to you. Aerenya took a step back. The scene fractured. She stood now in the ruins of Ashbale Crypt, the final burial place of the original Thorn Pact victims. The floor was black with soot and ash. Bones lined the walls, some still bearing rusted tags with names long since forbidden to speak. Wheeler stood in the center, smiling. But the pact knew better. It doesn't bind to silence. It binds to remembrance. And that's why it didn't stay dead. Aerenya's throat tightened. Why show me this? Because it's breaking, girl. The fracture point is coming, and you are at the center of it. He stepped closer, the stone under his feet whispering. You can sever it. You can choose release. She didn't move. You have only to kill him, Wheeler said softly. Strike through the center of your bond. Let the pact uncoil, let it unravel. And you'll be free. Aerenya's nails dug into her palms. You don't want to carry him. You've already carried too much. His madness is not yours. His pain is not yours. Her voice cracked. But it feels like mine. Because you summoned it, Wheeler said. You think this pact was given to you? No. You called it. You were the flame. He was the match. The image of Sylrien shimmered beside them, lying still in sleep, breath shallow, sweat at his brow. Dream Sylrien. Wheeler circled her like a shadow unfurling. He's still bound. You could do it now. Slide the blade in. Watch the thread snap. It wouldn't even be murder. It would be mercy. Aerenya's heart pounded. She looked at Sylrien's image. Pale skin. Collarbone barely rising with breath. And her hand trembled. A dagger waited at her side. She didn't remember it forming, but it was there, shaped of thought and fear and the thing no one had ever taught her how to put down. She stepped toward the bed. 1 step. 2. The blade rose. She could feel it, Wheeler's smile without seeing it. But then, a flicker. The air warped. The dream trembled. And another vision forced its way through, not of the present, but of the past. A marketplace. A boy. Silver hair. Golden eyes. A girl walking past, head down, a satchel clutched tight to her chest. She had brushed his shoulder by accident. She hadn't looked up. But something had passed between them. Just a whisper of thought. You're not alone. Aerenya gasped. Her knees buckled. Wheeler's voice rose sharply. Finish it. Now. But she turned. Her hands shaking. And she screamed. Don't touch him. The dream imploded. She woke with a jolt. Her lungs seized. The sheets beneath her were soaked. Wind roared against the glass of the observatory tower. Shadows curled at the corners of the room. Her breath hitched again. Something was in her hand. She looked down. And there it was. A knife. Real. Her fingers clenched around the hilt. And the tip grazed against bare skin. Sylrien lay in bed beside her, chest rising and falling. The blade trembled just above his throat. His eyes were closed. Unaware. Unarmed. Her other hand covered her mouth. She hadn't screamed aloud. She had carried the echo. Aerenya pulled the blade away with a cry, dropping it onto the floor as if it had burned her. She crawled backwards from the bed, chest heaving. Sylrien stirred but didn't wake. Tears slipped down her face, quiet, stubborn, burning. Not because she had almost killed him, but because some part of her still wanted to, and a deeper part of her never could. Chapter 7: The Wolf Who Refused to Bite. Snow fell like shards of breath against the stonework of the snow-glass courtyard, each flake a whisper of something the palace tried to forget. It was nearly dawn. The kind of hour where shadows waver, caught between memory and becoming. And Aerenya knelt in the center of it all, bare-kneed on frost, wind tangled in her hair, chest heaving, the dagger she'd almost buried in Sylrien's throat lying several feet away in the snow. She didn't reach for it. Didn't look at it. Her hands were raised, trembling, open to the air like a confession offered to the gods. Sylrien stood before her, wrapped in nothing but a loose storm-gray shirt and his own silence. His breath clouded between them. But he hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. Not even when she'd fallen to her knees. Not even when she said, "I was going to do it." Her voice cracked on the cold. He said nothing. She looked up, and her eyes were wide, not in fear, but in exhaustion. Grief. Relief. The kind of hollow left behind when one finally puts down a burden they never wanted to carry. "Every day since I got here," she whispered. "Every night I reminded myself where the artery runs. Behind the ear. Beneath the ribs. I told myself I'd only need one clean strike. One breath." She laughed once, hoarsely. "And then you spoke to me like I was human. And I forgot where the bones were." Sylrien's eyes flickered. "I told myself you were weakness." She looked at the ground. "You weren't." Another breath. Her throat worked. "You were clarity." He moved then. Just a single step forward, the frost crackling beneath his boot. And still she spoke. "I've thought about killing you 100 different ways." She looked up at him, and the pain in her voice was not aimed outward. It was the sound of a knife turned inward. "But last night," she whispered, "I looked at you, and all I wanted to destroy was the blade." Her eyes filled. Not in silence. "This time," she cried. Tears choked by gasps. Her whole frame shook with it. Not the cold. Not fear. Just grief. For the first time. Because she was no longer the blade. And she didn't know what that made her. Sylrien's breath hitched once. Then, "I know," he said. Not sharply. Not softly. Just truthfully. Aerenya froze. "What?" His expression didn't change. "I've always known." She blinked slow. But she couldn't stop the tears from falling harder. She pressed her sleeve to her mouth to muffle the sob that tried to rise, but it was too late. Her shoulders collapsed forward. "Then why?" she gasped. "Why did you let me stay?" His voice barely reached her. "Because you could kill me." The silence that followed should have been heavy. It wasn't. It was light. Like snow after breath. "Because," he added, "you were the only person in this place who could kill me, and still chose not to." Aerenya curled forward. And then he stepped forward, quietly, kneeling down in front of her. He touched her hand. Just once. A silent bridge. And she breathed like she hadn't in years. That breath was broken by footsteps. Sharp. Poised. Inevitable. The voice that followed cut like crystal. "Well, this explains so very much." They both looked up. Sylrien stood at the edge of the courtyard, flanked by 2 soldiers in gold and smoke blue. Her hair was untouched by snow, her expression a mask of calm inquiry layered over delight. "It is illegal," she said smoothly, "to wield a weapon against the heir apparent." Illegal and treasonous. She didn't strike, Sylrien said, voice hard. She intended to. She stopped. She hesitated, Isren corrected. Let's not confuse mercy with indecision. 2 guards moved forward. Sylrien rose instantly. You will not touch her. She will not be harmed, Isren said sweetly, only questioned. 1 hand raised. The soldiers seized Aerenya's arms. Her breath caught, but she didn't fight. High consort. Sylrien, Isren said, turning to him with something like genuine sympathy, I understand your attachment. But the pact is not yours alone. It belongs to the realm. If something within it is compromised. She is not a toxin, he snapped. No, Isren replied. But the blade she brought was. He moved a step forward. And she raised her voice, just slightly. I am the High Consort, Prince. And the Council will require an inquiry. Whether you agree or not. Sylrien's hand trembled. But Aerenya turned her head. And said, through cracked lips, don't. He looked at her. Her eyes were dry now. Dry and calm and tired. Let them take me, she said. And then they did. They led her through the undercourts, through the stairwells only used by bone scribes and prisoners marked for judgment. The walls were damp with age. The lanterns flickered with old wind. And as they dragged her down one final corridor, something caught her eye. A crack in the stone. A fracture just wide enough to fit a finger. Inside it, barely visible under moss and dust, was a line of carved letters. Thorvane. Replacer. Bloodlock. She froze. The guards tugged her forward. But her heart had already stopped. And in her mind, one thought echoed louder than Isren's sentence, louder than the betrayal, louder than the guards dragging her away. If I am the replacement, then who is meant to die first? Chapter 8. The Girl in the Crystal Cell. It was not silence that greeted her in the crystal binders. It was echo. Not sound, but memory. Touches of sensation laced into the walls themselves, transparent crystal grown from pact-bound minerals, designed to suppress resonance and fracture identity into palatable submission. No mirrors, no shadows, no warmth. Only light. Cold, white, ceaseless light. Aerenya sat on the floor with her knees drawn up, her hands pressed flat against the smooth curve of the wall. It was warm. Not comfort warm. Body warm. Like something had just breathed through the crystal before vanishing again. She hadn't spoken since they locked her in. There were no guards outside the door. No food tray through a slot. Only silence. And memory. Which meant the real punishment had begun. The hallucinations always did. They called it the echosphere, a side effect of isolating a pact bearer from their resonance field. The soul fought back. Created shapes, voices, projections, anything to feel again. But this was worse. The wall lit up suddenly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Aerenya's breath caught. She rose slowly. And in the glow of the wall, she saw it, herself. Standing over Sylrien. Hand on a dagger. Blood dripping down his throat. He didn't struggle. He just looked at her. And smiled. She stepped back. No. The light vanished. Darkness returned. She exhaled. But it happened again. The light. The wall. The image. Only this time he spoke. Do it, said the hallucination. End it before the rest of them do. She screamed, slammed her fists into the wall, but the scene didn't vanish. Another echo appeared. A different moment. She lay in Sylrien's arms, breath slowing, his forehead pressed to hers. He whispered, even if it ends in ruin, I'd choose you every time. Then the same hand, her hand, rose and plunged the blade again. 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 Each time, his breath caught in his throat, his gaze met hers, and he never stopped looking at her like he forgave her. Each time, she broke a little more. By the third cycle, she was crying. By the 6th, she was begging. By the 9th, the door hissed open. She was on the floor, nails bleeding, back against the corner, arms shaking. Wheeler entered like a shadow cast by thought. His voice was soft. Is it always the throat? Aerenya looked up. Her face was pale, streaked with the salt of a dozen collapsed breaths. Why, she rasped. Why are you here? He circled the cell. The crystal let him walk beside her like she was a creature in a glass museum tank. To observe. To record. To remind. Of what? Her voice cracked. That you were never the blade, he said gently. You were the hinge. The key. She blinked. What? Wheeler smiled. Did they never tell you, little thorn? That your name was not chosen by the pact. The pact was awakened because of you. Your blood. Your memory. Your remembrance. He paused beside a flickering sigil etched faintly into the wall. Executioners are sent. But keys are born. Aerenya closed her eyes. No. You are the beginning of the end, Wheeler said. And if he dies, the chain will break, but you will stay, just long enough to watch what replaces it. Leave. I will. He paused at the threshold. Sleep well, Thornkey. She didn't sleep. She paced. Screamed. Curled up again. Tried not to believe what he said. But the next hallucination came gentler. Warmer. Sylrien sat across from her. Real. Tangible. He didn't look like an echo. He looked tired. But his eyes were soft. She didn't move. You're not real, she whispered. I know. Then why are you here? His head tilted. That same boyish motion she'd seen in the dream from her childhood. That moment she'd brushed his shoulder and neither of them had looked back. Because I let you in, he said. She looked down. I didn't want this. I know. I was going to kill you. I know. I still might. He smiled faintly. That's not what scares me. Her throat tightened. What scares you? That you'll forget, he said, stepping closer, kneeling beside her. And then, his hands. Warm. Cupping her face. She shook. I'm not worth this, she said. I'm not meant to carry anything. His thumb brushed her cheek. I let you in, he whispered. Not to watch you die in here. Her lips parted. And before she could say his name, he vanished. The silence returned. But it felt different now. He'd said her name in a way no one ever had. Not like a warning. Not like an order. Like recognition. And now it echoed in her chest. Not like pain. But like the possibility of survival. She stood, dizzy, and walked to the wall. Rested her forehead against it. Why did you let me in, she whispered, if you knew I was the key? The wall pulsed. Words shimmered faintly, not in her voice, but in others. Faint, carved into light. Because a key that refuses to break keeps every door open. And still she stood there, crying. Not for him. Not for herself. But for the door that refused to close. Chapter 9. The Pact-Bound Test. Winhold courtroom had been dressed for deception. Banners hung in ceremonial stillness. Lanterns were lit with gold flame, not because the hall needed light, but because truth hid better in a glow that felt warm. The great glass columns hummed faintly with runes that monitored emotional pressure, while clerks, nobles, and council judges filled the crescent-tiered seats like vultures in silk. At the heart of it all stood Sylrien Iskarreth, High Consort, Kingdom's voice, Pax Shadow. She wore winter gray today, lined with cloud-threaded white. Her smile could have passed for mercy if one didn't know how often she'd smiled right before delivering verdicts. Her voice rang out, measured, sweet, false. In light of recent instability within the heir's resonance pattern and for the preservation of Crown Pact equilibrium, we are pleased to present a candidate, pre-tested, council-cleared, and temperamentally suited to serve as new stabilizer. The doors opened, and Riva stepped through. She was perfect. Visibly so. Golden curls, gentle stance, soft eyes like melted quartz. Her clothing bore the crisp lavender of low-grade empath certification. Everything about her screamed harmlessness. Everything except the silence that followed her entry. Sylrien extended an arm with the grace of someone offering a solution she'd already poisoned. Lady Riva of Clareth. Her emotional echo is soft, her presence unobtrusive. She is trained with Echo Hall's apprentice stabilizers for 3 years. Riva bowed. I only wish to serve the pact. The hall exhaled. Some nodded. One counselor even smiled. But Sylrien Iskarreth said nothing. He stood off to the side, arms crossed, dressed not for court but for war, sleeves rolled, black leather braced over his wrists. His jaw was locked, his eyes unreadable. Sylrien turned to him. Your Highness, for the sake of stability, we ask that you allow an open cycle test. The Echo Spire has been cleared. Silence. Long enough that people began to shift in their seats. Then he spoke. Fine. The test began in Observation Spire, an elevated tower laced with memory-threaded glass and observation circles used to measure joint emotional response. A standard empath Prince tether was initiated, hands hovering between them, one open, one closed. Riva trembled slightly as she positioned herself. Sylrien stood like stone. Begin, intoned the technician. The rune circle pulsed once. Then again. Riva closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently in concentration. Aerenya had never needed to close her eyes. The thought came unbidden, biting. Sylrien did not close his. He watched. He waited. He felt. Nothing. No burn. No resonance. No scent of blood in memory. No ash. No grief. No truth. Just softness. Curated sorrow. Pretty little emptiness. He stepped forward, placed his hand flat against the center of Riva's chest. Her eyes flew open. The room tensed. I feel nothing, he said. Sire, Sylrien began. He shoved her gently. Riva stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the resonance ring. I'm not a chalice for convenient touch, Sylrien said, voice now loud enough to echo. If you want me stable, give me iron, not satin. Sylrien descended a step. Her aptitude scores. Lie, he snarled. She's been tested. She doesn't feel, Sylrien said, stepping down from the platform. She simulates. He turned to the council, eyes glowing faintly now. You can throw replacements at me like bones to a beast. You can dress up silence and call it empathy. But you forget something. He looked toward the room, not just the judges, not just Sylrien. Everyone. I am not a beast, he said. I'm the heir. A beat. I'm not mad. And I'm not programmable. And no matter what you feed me, I will know what's missing. He walked straight out of the hall, leaving everyone to taste his truth in their teeth. Later, Sylrien Iskarreth cornered Sylrien in the high mirror corridor. You're lying. Sylrien didn't even blink. Lyra stepped closer. You forged the pact registry. I've seen the missing volumes. The bindings are still damp. Careful, princess, Sylrien said. Paranoia doesn't suit you. Who is her name meant to replace? Lyra's voice cracked. You knew Aerenya didn't come from nowhere. You placed her. Sylrien smiled with a softness that made Lyra's stomach twist. I placed nothing, she said. I merely kept the lock from collapsing. You'll destroy him, Lyra said. You'll burn her and break him, and when the pact ruptures, we'll be ready, Sylrien finished. Then, quieter. You're very brave, Lyra. Her fingers brushed Lyra's cheek. But bravery is so often the first to die in the avalanche of truth. That night, under blackout moonlight, Sylrien stood alone in his private quarters. He looked down at his hand. It still trembled. Not with rage. With emptiness. He closed his eyes. He saw her face. Not in the courtroom. Not in the tower. But in the prison. Where they'd left her. Where he had let them leave her. He opened his eyes. Commander, he said. A knight stepped forward from the dark. Retrieve the pact record. The original. The one they buried. Sire. Now. The knight bowed. And, Sylrien said, when you find it, tell me what her blood was traded for. He turned away from the window. Because someone made her a key. A pause. And I want to know what they locked behind her. Chapter 10. Blood Letters in the Garden. There was no heir in this version of the garden. only fog that pressed like lungs against her skin. The vines of the breathless garden, twisted, spectral, silver-veined, no longer clung to ceiling and stone, but floated like boneless limbs, suspended in a skyless dark. The flowers here didn't bloom. They watched. Aerenya stood barefoot on dream-soaked soil, and she was a child again. Not in body, but in memory. The contract dream had returned. A loop with no origin. No exit. Her wrists were smaller. Her hands filthy. Her lungs burned from running through a forest that no longer existed. She reached the clearing. And the altar stood waiting. Dark stone. Bone-washed. Veins carved into its center like a blooming thorn. Her mother knelt upon it, veiled in the crimson of the thorn sacrament. Arms outstretched. Eyes closed. And smiling. "No," the little girl whispered. "No, no, don't." But her voice didn't stop the movement. The priest raised the blade. And the girl in the dream, herself, screamed. Aerenya flinched even now, watching that smaller version of herself stumble forward and collapse to her knees in the roots, fists full of soil, sobbing with everything she never told the world. "I don't want to be a key." And that was when he appeared. Not in a flash. Not with grandeur. Just quietly. Across the altar, beyond the mist and shadow, Sylrien stood. Older than she was in that memory. Present. And still. He reached a hand through the mist. His eyes weren't afraid. They were listening. "I heard you," he said. "The night you screamed that, I was already tethered." She blinked. "I didn't know who you were," he continued, voice quieter now. "But I felt you. Felt the scream. Felt the burning altar. I didn't know what it meant. Only that someone was being broken open, and I couldn't stop listening." She stepped closer. "You were there. In the resonance field," he said. "Somewhere." He looked down at the girl crying at the foot of the altar. Then at her. "You were always louder than the others." Aerenya's heart twisted. "You were the first voice that didn't want to be heard." And then she ran. Across the altar, through the smoke, she crashed into him with more desperation than she'd ever shown while awake. Her arms wrapped around him. Her fingers clutched the back of his neck. She breathed in the familiar scent of him, storm skin and bruised air. He didn't pull away. But he didn't hold her either. Not at first. Then. She felt it. Not warmth. Not arms. But the stab. Sharp. Thin. A first prick on her palm. Then her arms. Her ribs. She gasped and stepped back. His skin, his chest, his arms had begun to shift. Vines unfurled along his shoulders. His skin turned to bark, splitting at the seams. Thorn points grew from his wrists, his clavicle, blooming like jagged roses of pain. Her hands were stained red where they'd held him. He looked at her. Still him. Still human in the eyes. "I told you," he said gently, "you let me in." She shook her head, stumbling. Blood dripped from her palms. "No, this isn't. I didn't say it would be easy. You're hurting me." "No," he whispered. "You're holding too tight." She fell to her knees. The dream twisted. The altar crumbled into ash. The forest pulled itself apart. And the child version of her stared, silently, from behind the thorn roots, no longer crying. Just watching. Aerenya looked up through tear-blurred eyes. And whispered, "I didn't recognize you." Sylrien, what was left of him in this dream, answered without sound. "I waited for you to speak." When she woke, the walls of the crystal cell gleamed faintly. There was blood on her fingertips. She sat up, dizzy. The ache was not from the dream. It was real. It lingered. She turned to the far wall. And froze. Because something had been scrawled there, low, near the ground, in thin strokes of blood-dry dark. Words. Her words? She crawled toward them on trembling hands. "Don't let him near. Don't let him near. Don't let him near." And beneath those lines, just one final scrawl, jagged and childlike. "He hurts when I love him." Aerenya curled into the corner. Not from the cold. But because for the first time since this all began, she realized she wasn't just afraid of losing him. She was afraid of what she became when she tried to keep him. Chapter 11. A Memory Not His. The memory pool in Bone Hall was not made of water. It shimmered like it, moved like it, even sang like it when disturbed, but it was memory-bound glass, liquefied thought. A surface that rippled with truth, not reflection. Sylrien stood at its edge, the stolen contract remnant clutched in his fist. The chamber around him was shaped like a hollowed lung, cold, close, faintly echoing. Bone-laced pillars lined the edges like crooked teeth, and overhead, the roof arched into darkness unmarred by flame or sky. Lyra stood just beyond the circle, arms crossed. She had broken half a dozen laws to get him this deep. Velar had not been informed. Yet? Are you certain you want to do this? Lyra asked. Sylrien didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the pool's surface. Aerenya's name, or what was left of it, still bled faintly from the edge of the page in his hand. The ink was older than his bloodline. She won't be in it, Lyra murmured. She's not the one who signed. I don't care, he said. She was there. He stepped forward and lowered the fragment into the pool. The surface rippled once. Then again. Then it opened. Not like a door. Like a wound. Smoke. It was always smoke first. And ash. Then a shape, a village in ruin. Thorn sigils on banners, half burned. The sky glowed orange with grief. Screams drifted like ashfall. And a boy. Standing near the edge of a collapsed building, cloak too big for his shoulders, eyes too wide. Sylrien felt his breath catch. It was him. Not now. Younger. Much younger. No crown, no pact, no name to defend. He stood half-hidden by scorched timber, watching something with the stillness of someone who had already understood too much about what could be taken from a person. His gaze was locked on a figure in the courtyard below. A child. A girl. Tiny. Fragile. Wrapped in a tattered red cloak lined with the signature thorn-stitched embroidery of the old Thornvein bloodline. Her knees were scraped. Her palms cut from digging through debris. And she was screaming. At nothing. At everything. I don't want to be the key. The memory rippled. The image sharpened. Sylrien's breath caught. She looked up. Not at him. Through him. Her eyes met his, not by design, not by destiny. Just collateral proximity. But the look stayed. And the silence between them didn't feel like a void. It felt like recognition. He remembered none of this. And yet, his voice trembled in real time. She. He stepped into the vision. She saw me. The child version of himself remained still. The girl screamed again, falling to her hands. Her sobs bled into the dirt. The priesthood surrounded her with red veils and smoke palm torches. No one stopped. No one saved her. Except, the boy didn't run. He watched. Longer than he should have. Long enough for her voice to thread its way into something deeper than memory. Into bone. Into pact. The vision snapped. Sylrien gasped as the pool flared with heat, searing the last of the contract to ash. He stumbled back from the edge. The room was still again. Lyra stepped forward, catching his shoulder. Are you? She didn't choose me, he said, voice ragged. I didn't choose her. No. He looked at her. Lyra's expression was unreadable. But something did. Sylrien's eyes burned. Not from light. From the implication. I thought I was being manipulated. Managed. I thought they placed her. They didn't. She was always there. Yes. He turned away, pacing once. The air was thick. She's not just my stabilizer. Lyra didn't reply. She's not even just a tether. He turned back to the pool. She's the scream that never stopped echoing. He swallowed, hands flexing. And I was the only one who heard it. A silence. Then, you're not bound to her because of the pact, Lyra said finally. Her voice was soft. Careful. You called the pact, she continued, the moment you answered her pain. Sylrien looked at her. The air trembled. No one bound you, Sylrien. He exhaled slowly. She stepped closer. You bound yourself. He closed his eyes. And in the dark behind his lids, he saw the red-cloaked girl scream again. Her hands bloody. Her voice cracking. Her eyes meeting his. And that was when it happened. The moment no one remembered. But both of them had felt. The moment he first heard the girl who would become his undoing. Or his only way through. Chapter 12, The Unbinding Ritual. The Underspire crypt had no ceiling. Only an endless throat of stone, carved in a time before records, sealed in a silence thicker than death. It was here the old kings sealed vows they could no longer carry. It was here they unmade names. And it was here, beneath a lattice of ashen roots and scorched bone runes, that Aerenya Thornvein was laid upon the Vowbreaker stone. Bound. Not by chains, but by runes that crawled like living ink across her skin. She did not scream. She did not plead. She simply lay still, watching as the final sigils flared red at her throat. A circle of pale-robed officiants surrounded her. Their chants were low, steady, bone-toned. The air grew thicker with every syllable, vibrating against the bones of the crypt. At the far end of the stone platform stood Velar, hands raised above a basin of blood glass. Beside him, Sylrien Iskarreth watched with the expression of a woman witnessing not punishment, but correction. She is a fracture, she said coldly. One that was allowed to grow too close to the core. She is a shadow that thought itself a sun, Velar added. The crypt's sigils flared to life. And Aerenya, though she bled from the inner seam of her wrists where the resonance cords were split, only tilted her head slightly. You can unmake a pact, she said quietly, but you can't unteach me how he looks when he's afraid. Velar's fingers curled. You will not remember his name when this is done. Then I'll remember the feel of it. Sylrien's smile thinned. Begin, she ordered. The officiant's chants surged. The blood glass basin lit up, throwing ghostly red against the ceilingless dark. The roots overhead quivered like nerves being pulled taut. The runes on Aerenya's arms ignited. She jerked once, but did not scream. A pulse of power echoed through the crypt. And then, the air broke. Wind slammed into the sanctum like a starved beast. The basin shattered. The runes shrieked. And something roared down the open throat of the skyless ceiling. A howl that did not belong to beast or man, but something between. The officiants scattered. Two collapsed. The third dropped dead from resonance backlash. Sylrien turned, arm raised to shield her eyes. What? Sylrien Iskarreth tore through the sigil barrier like it was mist. He landed at the edge of the stone altar, breath wild, hair blown back from his face, shirt stained with blood from someone else's blade. His eyes were fully gold. No veil. No mask. Only truth. He looked at Aerenya, body locked in place, blood trickling into her ear, eyes fluttering as the sigils tried to override her pulse. And he moved. He ran the final distance. Fell to his knees beside her. And pressed his hand to the seal on her ribs. It flared once, gold, not red. The pain hit him like a tidal wave, but he didn't flinch. He curled his body over hers like a shield. And then, as the room stilled in stunned horror, he looked up at Velar and Sylrien. And said, low and final, "If she dies, you lose me." Sylrien took one step forward. "You'd let the wolf out, just for her?" Sylrien didn't answer. He looked back at Aerenya. She was blinking now, trying to speak. He cradled the back of her head, lips brushing her temple. "I'm here," he whispered. "And if you go, I go with you." Tears leaked sideways down her cheeks. And her hand, trembling, weak, found the front of his shirt. "Not fair," she choked. "I wanted to be the one who chose." "You did. You never left?" "Not once." Velar's voice broke the silence. "You think this defiance makes you powerful?" he hissed. "You think you've chosen something real?" Sylrien rose slowly. He didn't let go of her hand. "She's not my stabilizer," he said, voice iron. "She's not my servant." His gaze locked with Sylrien's. She's my soul's other edge. The blood glass basin began to crack again, this time backwards, unmaking the ritual's root. Sylrien hissed, stepping back. We warned you. You let the beast override your reason. No, Sylrien growled. I let my reason override the kingdom's lies. Sylrien's hands shook. Then watch what your reason buys you. He turned to the officiants still standing. Activate blood claws. Segment 3. One priest gasped. But that's... Do it. The runes surged back to life. Aerenya gasped, her back arching from the stone. Sylrien. He pressed their foreheads together. Stay. With me. But her hand was slipping. Her pulse spiraled. Sylrien smiled coldly. Let's see how strong your choice feels once she's gone. Chapter 13. The Forest Where Names Die. The trees in Witherwood Ridge did not grow toward the sky. They curled inward, like ribs over a heart no longer beating. The bark was gray, leafless, veined in black. The wind here didn't whisper. It dragged. Heavy. Slow. Like it had forgotten how to run. And Aerenya Thornvein stumbled through it. She didn't know how far she'd gone from the crypt. She remembered only Sylrien's voice, rough, desperate, wrapped around her name like a dying vow. Then heat. Then darkness. Then running. Now! Pain. Her skin was burned in patches from the runes. The remnants of Sylrien's ritual still pulsed under her ribs like shards of glass too deep to cough out. Each breath was thinner than the last. Her knees gave way on a patch of rotting moss, and she barely caught herself against a stone. But her palm left blood on the surface. Real. Still warm. Still hers. Her fingers curled around a shard of black bark, and with the little strength left, she carved into the rock, not a message, not a plea. Just her name. Thornvein. Not because she wanted to be remembered, but because she was afraid no one else would. The blood dripped down the stone, and she leaned her head against it, breathing shallow, eyes closed, and whispered, If you listen again, if your soul echoes again, will you remember this name? The wind didn't answer. Only the sound of branches creaking overhead like bones. The crack of a crossbow bolt split the quiet. It struck the tree above her, embedding deep. She didn't move. Couldn't. Boots crunched against the decayed roots. Then a voice. Flat. Unfeeling. Wind-gilled standard tone. There. Target confirmed. Subject A. Resonance breach confirmed. Marked for termination under High Court's exile clause. Aerenya exhaled. Not in fear. In surrender. Her fingers slid from the stone. One soldier raised a weapon. But, stand down, came a voice. Sharp. Regal. Sylrien Iskarreth stepped from the shadows, her white cloak dark with soil, her braid loosed from its usual royal knot. The soldiers froze. My lady. She is under my protection, Sylrien snapped. She's a resonance hazard. She is a royal patient. And any man who spills her blood spills mine. Hesitation. Then one soldier, braver or stupider, spoke. With respect, princess, the council decree. I'm the decree. She stepped forward, drew a blade from her hip. Not to strike, but to cut her own palm. The blood fell hot into the dirt beside Aerenya's body. Sylrien knelt, pressing the bleeding palm to the girl's forehead. I seal her pact breach, she said. With blood of the house that stole her name. The wind howled. For a moment, the forest remembered. And then, silence. The resonance ripple faded. Aerenya did not stir. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin cold, but alive. Just barely. The soldiers retreated without another word. Sylrien stayed long after they left. She sat beside the girl she'd spent so long mistrusting, misplacing, misjudging. And for the first time, Sylrien didn't look like a sister of a prince. She looked like the girl who should have been on the altar. Who wasn't? She looked down at the stone. Saw the name carved in blood. Why, she whispered. Why would you fight so hard, just to be seen? Her own throat tightened. She had no answer. She only pressed her hand tighter to Aerenya's cooling skin and closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You were never the replacement." Somewhere beneath the edge of consciousness, in a place not quite dream, not quite breath, Aerenya floated. She did not know if she was alive. She did not know if she still was. There was no sound, no light, only a heartbeat, faint, then again, and with it, a voice. Low, torn from memory, or perhaps sent through the pack's deepest wound. "I will not let you die like you were never here." And it was his. Even if her body didn't believe it, her soul did. And so she stayed. Just a little longer. Chapter 14. A Kiss with No Memory. The cold inside Frostshade Grotto did not bite. It clung. Soft and wet and heavy, like breath caught in stone lungs. The cavern wound deep into the side of the northern ridge, veiled behind snow-sunken brush and a curtain of icicle-rooted vines. Time forgot this place. So did light. So did gods. But Sylrien hadn't. Not as a boy. Not now. He stepped into the hollow carrying Aerenya in his arms, her weight pressed to his chest like a final vow no one had spoken aloud. Her skin had cooled, her breath had slowed, and her head lulled just enough for him to feel the weight of every lost second. Lyra trailed behind in silence, her own hands blood-stained, her face unreadable. She hadn't spoken since they found her. She hadn't needed to. Sylrien had said just one thing as he lifted Aerenya from the stone where she'd carved her name. "I've got her now." Now he knelt at the far end of the grotto, where old moss and frost-scattered pelts still lay from a time he had run here to not become a wolf. He laid her down gently. The stone beneath her was cold, but he placed his cloak beneath her spine, wrapping it tight. Her eyes fluttered. "Syl." He leaned close. "I'm here." She blinked slowly. "Did I die?" "No." A pause. "Are you lying?" He almost smiled. "Almost. I wouldn't know how." A ragged breath passed her lips. Her fingers twitched. He caught her hand, wrapping it in both of his. Her wrist was fragile. The veins there still faintly glowed with the afterburn of blood-etched runes. "You shouldn't talk. You shouldn't have come." "I always come." She chuckled faintly, barely a sound. "That's the kind of line that makes people die for you." He looked away. She turned her head, eyes drifting toward the icicles hanging like teeth above them. "You kissed me once," she murmured. "To stop the pain." "I didn't mean to." "Then you kissed me again." "To feel it." "I needed to understand." She turned her head toward him. "You going to kiss me now?" He looked down at her. And he didn't answer with words. He kissed her. Slow. Real. No urgency, no claim, no wild pulse demanding possession. Just warmth. And breath. And the echo of something deeper than understanding. He felt her sigh into him. And for one moment, he remembered everything. The altar. The girl in red. The fire. The years he spent not knowing he was listening to someone beg not to be chosen. But when he pulled back, her eyes were glassy again. And her voice, far. "You remember me?" He swallowed. "Yes." "Good," she whispered. Her lashes fluttered. "Because the me you remember will be the only one who lives." His hand stilled. "What?" But she didn't answer. Her chest still rose and fell. Her lips still parted slightly in breath. But something in the tether between them, the hidden string pulled tight since the first time they touched, had dimmed. He pressed his fingers to her wrist. Pulse. Still there. But it didn't resonate. He reached inward. Toward the bond. The shared breath. The echo. And felt. Nothing. No response. No mirrored heartbeat. Only his grief unanswered. He froze. She was still alive. But their pact was dying. His mind reeled. He didn't speak. Didn't scream. Only bowed his head until his forehead touched hers again. Aerenya stirred faintly. And said, almost inaudible, "I'm not afraid to die." He flinched. I'm afraid, she breathed, that when you make it to the end, I won't be in it. Silence. He pressed her hand to his chest. His heart was still beating. Loud. Clear. Alone. He kissed her forehead and said, I will find the first name written in this pact. He straightened. His voice dropped lower. Firmer. I will rip it out if I have to. A pause. Even if it means cutting out half of myself. From the shadows, Lyra watched. And for the first time since she learned she was the one meant to die in Aerenya's place, she wished she had. Chapter 15. The Mirror Pact. The Moonglass Chamber was not built for truth. It was built for spectacle. The floor shimmered with mirrored tiles, the ceiling domed in lunar crystal that caught light from nowhere and turned it into reverence. It was here that oaths were made and broken, that names were rewritten and families undone. And it was here that Sylrien Iskarreth strode in with blood on his boots and a torn contract in his hand. Behind him, the doors slammed shut. Wheeler did not rise from his dais. He smiled instead, like a man who had written the script before the actors had learned their lines. Isren stood at the chamber's edge, her posture elegant, her lips folded into patient amusement. Lyra stood behind them both, tense, watching, waiting. Let me see it, Sylrien said, lifting the fragment. Wheeler tilted his head. See what? The pact's origin, Sylrien growled. The first imprint. The true summoner. You all speak in riddles and veiled decrees. I want the truth. Wheeler's gaze slid to Isren. She nodded once. Very well, Wheeler said, rising slowly. He extended his hand toward the center of the chamber. The mirrored floor responded, runes lighting in concentric circles. A pulse trembled up the walls. Then the glass dome above darkened, turning from moonlight to memory. The mirror pact activated, and the room filled with projection. Not illusion. Record. Ether-woven memory bound in pact root. And suddenly, they all saw her. Not as she was, but as she had been. A child, barely taller than a man's hip, kneeling in a field of ash and bone. Her cloak torn, her hands bloodied, her voice hoarse from screaming. Around her, what remained of her clan lay in heaps. Faces half burned, eyes wide. One last fire still glowed behind her, devouring the temple she had once called home. But her voice, clear, commanding, soft in its grief. I offer it. The projection hovered above the chamber, spinning slowly. I give my name, my blood, my resonance. Bind it. She drew a shard of temple glass and slit her palm. The blood hissed as it struck the dirt. A rune unfurled beneath her knees. Bind it to the wolves. Let me take the weight, so none of them have to suffer again. Another slice, across her wrist. The rune flared brighter. The memory twisted. Her voice became a whisper inside every person in the room. I don't want them to feel what I feel. A silence. Then, a final word. Please. And the pact ignited, swallowing the sky. The projection faded, and the chamber fell into breathless quiet. Sylrien stood frozen. He had not moved since the first image. He couldn't. His throat ached. Not from rage. From something worse. Recognition. His voice cracked. She wasn't forced. Wheeler's smile sharpened. No, she called it. Yes, she offered herself. Wheeler stepped closer. She is the mirror. Sylrien didn't speak. His hand still held the torn fragment. It felt heavier now, as if it carried her bones inside it. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. She didn't want to destroy us. No, Isren agreed, stepping forward now. She wanted to protect you. The entire bloodline. The entire pack. She turned to the room, addressing the watching council and Bone Guard. And, because she did, every wolf born since that night has shared less pain. Less madness. Less curse. Sylrien's fingers tightened. She carried it. Isren's voice darkened. And now that the pact is collapsing, only she can unmake it. He looked at her. What? She summoned it, Sylrien said smoothly. She must dismiss it. You want her to die. Sylrien's smile didn't falter. It's the natural course of all summoner-bound contracts. The soul calls. The soul seals. And when the time comes, the soul ends. No, Sylrien said. We can sever it. Transfer it. I can take. You're not the key, Wheeler interrupted. You never were. Sylrien's breath shook. She is. The chamber flickered once more. The last moment from the projection froze in the dome overhead. Little Aerenya, covered in ash, whispering into the dirt. I don't want them to feel what I feel. Wheeler stepped forward, voice calm, cruel. You want the truth? Sylrien turned to him. Then here it is. Wheeler raised a hand. Either she dies. He lowered it. Or you live the rest of your days with every wolf's pain burning in your skull. Sylrien's jaw clenched. In your sleep, you will hear the dying screams of 1,000 bloodlines. In your waking hours, your hands will shake from pain that isn't yours. You will hunt by accident, kill by instinct, tear through your court like an animal. You will become the storm the pact tried to cage. A pause. Then, because that's what she gave her life to spare you from. The silence cracked. And still Sylrien did not move, did not weep, only stood there. Heartbreaking, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the child in the mirror projection. Not the girl, not the blade, not the pawn, just her. Behind him, Lyra whispered to herself. She didn't want to be remembered for the pain she held. She looked up. She wanted to be remembered for how much of it she kept from us. Above them, the projection faded. The room waited. And in the center of it all, Sylrien whispered one word. Aerenya. And for the first time in years, his voice broke on her name. Chapter 16. The Wolf in the Dreaming Well. There was no edge to the water in the Dreaming Well. It was sky and surface and shadow all at once, glass that breathed, rippled, pulsed with the dreams of the dying and the nearly dead. Here, memory did not run backward. It looped, collapsed, devoured itself. And Aerenya floated in the center of it, ribs broken and breath stilled, suspended between the before and the never again. Her body in the waking world lay still in Frosty Grotto, but her soul was walking through the place wolves were warned never to look. She stepped into the well's basin with bare feet. Blood met her first. Not water. It clung warm and heavy, dark as dusk. Then, a shape moved beneath the surface. It did not swim. It stalked. And when it rose, it was him. Not as man. Not as prince. But wolf. Massive. Broad-shouldered. Taller than she remembered. His fur was a chaos of night and frost wind, and his eyes were white. Completely. Not blind. Not glowing. Just empty. The Sylrien she knew had been swallowed by something colder. He did not growl. He watched. Aerenya stepped forward. His form rippled in the water like a wound made flesh. I know you, she said. The wolf didn't move. She lifted a hand. Her breath shook. I remember the first time you couldn't look away from me. Still nothing. I remember, she said softer, because it was the first time I wanted to live long enough to be seen. The wolf lunged. No warning. Teeth. Flesh. Pain. His jaws sank into her shoulder and threw her down. Her body cracked against the well's bottom, if there was a bottom. She landed in blood again, her chest heaving, her skin split. She did not scream. She did not fight. She looked up as his teeth grazed her collarbone, pressure building. Go ahead, she said through blood. Bite. He froze. I'm not afraid of you, she gasped. Because every nerve in this body was born from yours. His claws dug deeper. Her back arched in pain. I'm not a gift they gave you, she choked out. I'm the grief you buried. His head jerked. I'm the scream that stuck to your ribs. His body trembled. She raised a bloodied hand and pressed it to his snout. And if you kill me now, Sylrien, she whispered, I'll be the last pain you ever feel. Then, Silence. No movement. And slowly, the pressure in his body shifted. The weight of his form began to collapse, limbs folding, for receding like smoke drawn backward into memory. His chest heaved. His claws shrank. And then, he was just a boy again. Naked. Bruised. Shaking. Collapsed into her lap. She held him. Even though her arms barely worked. Even though her ribs had been shattered. She held him like something she hadn't realized she'd been born for. And he whispered into her skin. Don't let go. She rested her cheek to the crown of his hair. Even now, she murmured, you're heavier when you're hurting. His fingers gripped her waist. I didn't want to go there, he rasped. I didn't mean to go that far. I know. I forgot you. You remembered enough to bite. He huffed a laugh that cracked in the middle. I never want to do that again. She pulled him closer. You will. He went still. You will, she repeated, because pain doesn't stop just because we love someone. A pause. But I'll come back every time. His breath hitched. Even if I forget again? She nodded. Even then. The well shimmered around them. And slowly, the blood began to recede. When she woke, she was cold. Real-world cold. The frost of the grotto bit her lips, her cheeks, her throat. Lyra was asleep at the far wall, one hand on a blade. Sylrien knelt at her side, awake, alert, his coat wrapped around her. She tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her. Her chest. Her shoulder. Her ribs. All of it. Blood-stained bandages were already wrapped over half her torso. He looked at her. You were talking in your sleep. She blinked slowly. What did I say? He paused. You said, bite harder, you coward. Aerenya groaned. Gods. He smirked. But his smile didn't last. There was something haunted in his gaze. Something neither of them said. Because both of them knew what happened when the bond went dark. And neither wanted to admit they liked being found just a little too much. That night, after she drifted back to sleep, the wind outside the grotto shifted. She stirred faintly. And something, murmured through the crack in the stone above her head. Not a voice. Not quite. But it said, in the sound of moving frost, before you die, I will remember all your pain. She opened her eyes. Sylrien was still asleep. The whisper hadn't come from him. She sat up slowly, breath catching. Because the voice was the pact. And it had finally begun to speak on its own. Chapter 17. The Knife Between Our Names. The Ashvale Stone Hall had never been used for mercy. Built in the heart of the oldest fortress, it had once been the site of blood-crowning rituals, where wolf kings proved their dominance not through coronation, but through survival. Where names were carved into stone only after they were carved into flesh. Tonight, its torches burned colder than flame. At the chamber's center, a slab of ash marble lay ready. A ritual blade rested on velvet. Beside it, the pact seal shimmered faintly, its center fractured like a cracked eye. Around the perimeter, wind-blood nobles, scribes, and pact enforcers stood silent in their ceremonial silks. And at the front of it all, her posture perfect and her eyes gleaming. Sylrien Iskarreth. She lifted a gloved hand. The pact is unraveling, she said, her voice like a gavel in winter. And with it, the bonds that hold our people from madness. The girl who summoned it is here. We demand its proper end. She gestured toward Aerenya, who stood barefoot in the center of the seal. Her wounds were still healing, her breath uneven, but her eyes, unflinching. She must complete what she began, Sylrien said. With blood. At her side, Wheeler held the ancient text open, his fingers poised over the final clause. Lyra stood just behind him, her jaw clenched, her eyes darting toward the shadows. Where Sylrien stepped forward. Alone. No crown. No guards. Only wind trailing in his wake like a warning. He walked up the central aisle until he stood between Aerenya and the blade. I'll do it, he said, calm. Lo. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Sylrien's brow arched. You cannot. I'm royal blood, he said. The contract was bound to me as much as to her. The resonance was not one-sided. He looked at Aerenya. She looked at him. And the silence between them was louder than any storm. Let me end it, he said. Aerenya stepped forward and took the blade. She didn't speak, didn't ask for permission. She turned it on herself and raised it to her throat. Gasps turned to shrieks. Guards stepped forward, but Sylrien moved faster. He dropped to his knees, caught her wrist, the blade still pressed to her skin. Aerenya. Don't, she said. Her voice shook. Don't try to save me from something I built to save you. Tears welled in her eyes. You said you'd find the contract source. It's me. The pain, the grief, the decision. It was all me. So if it must end. She pressed the blade tighter. Let it end. His fingers tightened around her wrist. Then it should be my death. No, she said, voice breaking. You weren't the one who begged the world to forget what pain felt like. He swallowed hard. You weren't the one who watched your mother burn and thought, if I carry it, maybe no one else will have to. A beat. I was. The blade slipped, just a little. A trickle of blood slid down her throat. He caught it with his palm, pressing hard to stop it. I won't let you do this, he said, voice thick. I'm already undone, she whispered. You just didn't see it. A silence. Then, without warning, Sylrien pressed his forehead to hers. He said nothing, but the wind in the room shifted. The pact seal flickered, then flared. The bond between them pulled tight again, thrumming. His voice cracked against her lips. If you die like this, I will forget you. She closed her eyes. I know, but I don't want to forget you. She smiled, tears streaking down her cheeks. You only have to remember this, she whispered. That I didn't come to kill you. He choked. Then why? Her fingers slipped through his hair, and she pressed the blade between their hands. He looked down and saw both their blood on the hilt. He met her gaze, and she said, because when I loved you, it hurt worse than anything else. The silence shattered. Sylrien clapped once. Slow. Mocking. You two really are poetic. They didn't look at her. She stepped forward, eyes cold. But you still don't understand. Her voice dropped. This isn't just your little tragedy. She swept her hand toward the packed seal, which now pulsed like a heartbeat. The contract doesn't care about love, or grief, or pain. It only knows completion. She stepped closer to Aerenya. When she dies, Sylrien said, smiling, you will forget her. Because that is the final toll. And she tilted her head. I will be the only one left to remember how she died for you. Sylrien stood slowly, turned, and for the first time, he bared his teeth. Then I'll kill the memory itself. And lightning cracked across the seal. Chapter 18, The Lie Called Freedom. The wind at the northern Vale border was not made of air. It was made of teeth. Cold, bladed, endless. It tore at Aerenya's cloak as she stumbled along the ridge, her boots leaving half-formed prints that the snow devoured behind her. The mountain pass was narrow and cruel, its trees stripped bare and twisted sideways from storms that remembered war. But none of it stopped her. She was leaving. Not him. Not love. But the pact. If she could put enough distance between them, enough miles, enough sky, enough silence, maybe the bond would thin. Maybe the resonance would snap. Maybe Sylrien could finally breathe without her heartbeat echoing inside his ribs. She had told him none of this. Because he would follow. Because he always had. So she fled in the silence before sunrise. And every half-mile, she dropped another letter. Short ones. Rushed. Blood-streaked ink. Don't come after me. Don't remember me. Don't feel me anymore. She wasn't sure if he'd feel the absence before he read the words. She hoped he wouldn't. By the time she reached the Vale's final outpost, the snow had become a wall. Visibility was nothing. Her lungs burned. But she kept walking. Until she heard it. A breath behind her. No. A heartbeat. She spun just in time to see a blur crash through the snow, armorless, half-frozen, wind-cut. Sylrien. He fell to one knee, snow clinging to his lashes, his coat torn, his fingers red. He didn't speak. He just reached for the hem of her cloak and gripped it tight. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. His shoulders heaved with every breath. He looked up at her. His eyes weren't angry, weren't desperate. They were broken. "I'm not afraid of you dying," he said hoarsely. She didn't move. "I'm afraid you think dying is the only way you can prove you loved me." The snow muffled everything. Except that. Her lip trembled. He still didn't let go. "I don't want your death," he said. "I want your mornings. Your silences. Even the parts you hide when you think I'm not listening." She shook her head. "I was trying to protect you. Then why does it feel like you buried me alive?" Her eyes filled. "Every time I breathe without you," he whispered, "I feel like I'm inhaling something stolen." She stepped back. But he followed. Not standing. Still kneeling. "I'm not your weight," he said. "You don't have to carry me out of your chest like a wound." He looked down at her letters, soaked and crumpled at his feet. "I don't want this." She whispered, "You don't get to choose what I give." He looked up again. "And you don't get to choose what I remember." Tears fell freely down her cheeks now. He reached for her hand. And when their skin touched, they both shook. The pact hadn't broken. It had just quieted. And now it roared back to life, their pulses syncing with the mountain's bones. He stood slowly. She didn't let go. Neither did he. Then, silently, he pulled her into his arms. They said nothing. Only the storm spoke. And it said, "Not yet. Not the end." Just another pause. They found shelter in the curve of a stone archway, hollowed by wind, half collapsed. Lyra had left a flare mark nearby. She'd helped him track her here. She hadn't followed. She knew when to leave them alone. Inside the ruin, they sat close, wrapped in the cloak, sharing heat and silence. Aerenya spoke first. Not loudly. Just enough. "If one day," she said, "you forget me." His body stilled. She didn't look at him. "If this pact unbinds the way they say, if everything I gave becomes just another scar on the history of your blood." She turned her head slightly, her voice thinner. "Sylrien, would you fall in love with me again?" He didn't answer right away. She didn't press. The snow fell harder outside. And just when she thought he might deflect, or lie, or change the subject, he pulled her closer, one hand behind her neck, the other over her heart. And he said, quietly, "I'll love you in every version." He kissed her temple, even the ones I don't remember. And then, the night folded in around them. No promises, no more letters, only the pact of shared warmth. And a love not meant to be safe, but chosen, over, and over, and over again. Chapter 19, The Ceremony of Erasure. The Ash Spire summit was older than the wind. Built into the ragged throat of the mountain, it crowned the world with teeth, stone spires and bone-carved obelisks clawing toward the clouds like the ribs of something long buried and still hungry. The summit was sacred, not for mercy, but for memory. And today, they had come to erase one. The Bone Hall Council stood in a circle, cloaks flaring in the gale. Their masks were carved from ancient pack stone, each shaped with the runes of bloodlines long dead. In the center of the summit, a slab of dark slate had been placed, flat, circular, inscribed with the ritual script of severance. Sylrien stood before it, her pale hair pinned high, her hands folded with divine precision. Beside her, Wheeler held the erasure tablet, etched with the pact clause that none dared speak aloud until now. He did not read it yet. He waited. Let the moment breathe. Let the wind taste the fear in the air. "Brothers," Sylrien said to the council, "we have kept this curse alive too long." She turned toward the obelisk of oath, where her voice would echo to every court still listening. "The Thorn Pact, born of grief, has unraveled. Its summoner still breathes, though her role ended the night she offered her blood. And our prince, our heir, is no longer stable. The wind screamed around them, slicing across her words like blades. She must be released. A pause. From us. Velar raised the stone tablet. All eyes turned to it. The runes lit faintly, as if heat from old blood had reawakened its curse. Let it be known, Velar intoned, that should the summoner perish, the bound prince will forget her name. In doing so, the emotional root of the pact shall dissolve, and the balance of the wool-born shall be restored. No one moved. A beat of silence. And then, the wind changed. Literally. The snow that had howled around the summit shifted, split, and hurled outward like a broken tide. And at the edge of the stone circle, stepping through the chaos with fury in his bones, Sylrien Iskarreth arrived. He was not dressed as a prince, not armored like a general, not cloaked like a diplomat. He wore the frost, the silence, the storm, and nothing else. No pretense, no leash, no mask. Stop this, he said, voice low and vicious. Now. Sylrien raised a brow. You interrupt the council? I end it. Velar stepped forward. This is not your decision. Sylrien's eyes gleamed gold. Everything about this is mine. You are not the summoner, Velar said. But I am the one who feels her die every time you speak her name like it's dirt. The wind pulsed again. One of the council masks cracked. You dare threaten balance? Sylrien said. I dare name what this is. He stepped closer. She remembers the grief of our people better than any of us. She swallowed it. Became it. And now you want to kill her and call it freedom. He looked at each masked face. You want to forget her. He didn't raise his voice. But it echoed anyway. You want her pain to die with her so your hands stay clean. So your sons don't ask why the wolf inside them howls for someone they've never met. A silence. Cold. Then, I am not here to beg, he said. He faced the tablet. His voice cracked. But if you touch her, if you take her name out of my bones, I swear to every god buried beneath this mountain. He stepped forward. The wind screamed around him. I will become the storm that drowns your line. Sylrien narrowed her eyes. You would become a traitor. A killer. A monster. He didn't flinch. I'd rather be a monster who remembers her, he said, than a king who doesn't. Velar lowered the tablet. And smiled. Not with mirth. With victory. You think you protect her, he said. Sylrien's jaw clenched. You think this is your love story. He held the stone higher. But you were never the hero. A pause. You were never even the man. The wind fell still. You, Velar said, voice sharp as the blade under the tablet's seal, were the wolf she called when she couldn't carry the pain alone. He let the words sit. Let them sting. She didn't fall in love with you. She made you. Out of grief. Another silence. And Velar whispered, You're not here to save her, Sylrien. He stepped into the circle. You're here to end her purpose. Sylrien stood frozen. Breathless. The summit held its breath. And, for a moment, all that could be heard was the wind. And his heart. Breaking. Somewhere far below, in a cave neither warm nor safe, Aerenya stirred in her sleep. She clutched her chest. And whispered a name. His. But the bond between them trembled. Because somewhere above, someone had just lit the fire that would either burn them clean, or turn them into the end of the world. Chapter 20, The Bite and the Bloom. The road to Flaremore ruins was half-eaten by ash. What had once been a sanctuary for oaths now slumped in decay, columns blackened by fire, archways choked with creeping ivy, and shards of packstone shattered underfoot like broken tongues. The wind had a memory here. It spoke in petals of ash and whispers of blood. And Aerenya limped through it with Sylrien at her side. Neither spoke much. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been screamed, wept, or whispered into half-dead dreams. They found shelter beneath a collapsed vault overgrown with thistlevine. In the center of what might once have been a sacred chamber, The floor still bore the spiral of the first pact. Red lines etched into the marble, faded but unyielding. Aerenya knelt by it. She touched the groove where blood had once pooled. "It was made here," she murmured, before they even knew what it would cost. Sylrien crouched beside her. His fingers brushed the back of her hand. "I don't care who started it," he said. "Not anymore." She looked at him. "I care about where it ends." He nodded, and added, "As long as it ends with you still breathing." She didn't answer, because she didn't believe it would. Night fell slow. The ruins glowed faintly under moonlight, casting strange patterns on the stone, shadows of rituals long lost, of promises made in the dark. Sylrien had built a fire between two collapsed pillars. It burned soft and low, its light catching the edges of his jaw as he leaned back, cloak loose, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Aerenya watched him for a long time, then moved to sit beside him. Their shoulders touched. Silence stretched. Then, "Let me bite you," she said quietly. His head turned toward her. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile. "Why?" "Not to mark," she said. "Not to claim." Her eyes were steady. "I want to feel you once more. In the bond. Without fear. Without interruption. Just proof." He hesitated. Then slowly, he pulled his shirt from his shoulder, baring the plane of his skin. "Here." She leaned in. Her breath trembled. She pressed her lips to the spot above his shoulder blade, then sank her teeth in. Just enough to feel him shudder. His hands clenched into the dirt. He did not groan, did not gasp. He breathed. And when she pulled back, her tears had mixed with the small smear of blood. He looked at her. Not like a prince. Not like a cursed man. But like something undone. That, he whispered, weighed more than every command I've ever obeyed. She tucked her face into his shoulder. Her arms curled around his chest. "Now I know you are real." And he held her there. They did not kiss. They did not undress. Their intimacy wasn't desperate. It was sacred. Quiet. A slow fusion of two souls trying not to come apart before the knife landed. He whispered her name once. She didn't respond. She just pressed her palm to his heart and listened. Until it slowed. Until the night sealed them in the breath between surrender and sleep. When dawn bloomed pale and violet through the ruined arches, Aerenya reached for him. But he wasn't there. Her pulse leapt. She sat up. The fire had died. The cloak still held her warmth. But the man was gone. Only a folded slip of parchment rested beside her bare foot. She snatched it up. It wasn't long. "I'm going to the oath severance altar. I'll carve your name into my bones before they erase it from my mind." Below it, one line in his handwriting, hastier, barely legible. "If I can't keep you, I'll keep the scar you left in me." She closed her eyes. And for the first time since the pact began to die, she sobbed. Not because she feared the end, but because he had chosen a pain so permanent, just to remember her. Chapter 21: His Blood Against the Stone. The Thornbone platform was a place of endings. Not deaths, but vows broken so brutally they left the land itself stained. Jutting from the edge of a mountain spine, the platform hovered over mist, suspended by prayer iron chains and the bones of the wolves who had renounced their names. Beneath it, a canyon howled, its echoes the last breath of every oath that had shattered here. And today, Sylrien Iskarreth came to carve a name. Not his. Hers. He stepped barefoot across the stone, his cloak dragging behind him like a trail of smoke. Snow clung to his jaw, the wind snapping strands of silver-blue hair across his face. He did not look back. Did not pause. He reached the center of the platform where the bone pillar stood, half marble, half bloodstone, and entirely unmarked by mortal memory. Until now. "Bring the forge," he said. The wind howled louder. A pair of guards, Lyra's loyalists, emerged from the mist with an iron crucible glowing like a heart torn open. Inside it, molten thorn iron, mined from the cursed veins of the first packed lands, mixed with bone ash and drop forged with wolf blood runes. It hissed as it was set beside the pillar. "Sire," one of the guards murmured, "this metal was never meant to be used in bone scribing." "I know. You'll be bound to it. Physically. Spiritually. If you carve her into your memory here, the pack's rage won't be able to." "I know." The guard fell silent. Sylrien rolled back his sleeve, flexed his wrist, and bit. His fangs tore deep, slicing into flesh with savage ease. Blood ran down his arm, thick and pulsing. He dipped his fingers into the molten iron, and with his own bleeding hand, he began to write, "Aerenya Thornavane." The letters glowed as they burned into the pillar. Each one hissed as it met the stone, sending steam and smoke curling into the sky like prayers gone wrong. A wind shifted behind him. Wheeler stepped forward, hood drawn low, his eyes gleaming like dusk. "You know what you're doing?" he asked softly. Sylrien didn't look up. "She is the beginning of my madness." He finished the curve of the final letter. "So she will be the end of my survival." Wheeler exhaled. "If you inscribe her into royal bone, your empathy will never reset. The pact will be fused to you. Forever. You'll never pull free of the Wolzong." Sylrien finally looked at him. "I don't want to be free." The wind screamed past them. "I want to be anchored." He turned back to the stone, pressed his bleeding palm over her name, and whispered, "If I can't hold her hand, I'll hold her echo." Wheeler's voice dropped lower. "Even if it means you lose your mind?" A pause. Sylrien's jaw tightened. "I already lost her." He pressed harder. His blood sank deeper into the grooves. And the stone accepted it. A hum rippled through the air, raw, ancient, hungry. Behind them, Lyra arrived, breath caught in her throat. She saw the name, saw the blood, saw what it meant. Sylrien. He didn't turn. Wheeler stepped closer. "One last attempt. You're not saving her. You're condemning yourself." Sylrien wiped his palm across the base of the stone. "She gave everything to protect this kingdom." He looked over his shoulder, eyes glowing gold. "I will give my sanity to make sure no one forgets her name." The stone pulsed once. The wind changed. And deep beneath the platform, a growl rumbled from the bones of the wolves buried in the earth. The pact heard him, and it would not let go. Wheeler stepped back, face unreadable. He murmured to the wind, perhaps not even meaning for anyone to hear. "You'll regret this." Sylrien said nothing. "You'll remember her too clearly." He paused. "And that clarity will kill her." Sylrien turned back to the stone, fingers trailing the last letter as it hardened. "I'd rather she die remembered," he said softly, "than live erased." And with that, he dropped to his knees. Alone. Before the name. Before the cost. And let the pain anchor him to what love could not save. Chapter 22, The Memory That Wouldn't Fade. The path to Silverglen Falls had always been a place for endings. Wolves who renounced their names came here in winter. Not to die, but to let go. The river took their memories. The spray stripped away love, grief, legacy, until only the bones remained. It was supposed to be peaceful. But when Aerenya reached the edge of the falls, she was not peaceful. She was screaming. She shoved past wind-cloaked guards, blood still damp in her boots, frost-bitten fingers trembling against the carved stone where the pact seal had just begun to glow. "No, no, stop." But the ritual had already burned through. The last arcane flare still hovered in the air, a white-hot afterimage etched behind her eyes. "Where is he?" A hand caught her wrist. Lyra. Her face pale. Ash smeared along her cheek. "I tried to stop him," she said. He didn't listen. Aerenya's breath came in gasps. The air stung like broken glass in her lungs. "Where is he?" she repeated. Lyra nodded toward the altar. A figure stepped forward from the misted cliff edge. Sylrien. He wasn't in armor. His shirt clung to him like damp paper. His boots were raw with mud. His palms streaked red from the oath cut he'd made over the bloodstone. And yet, he looked calm. Too calm. Aerenya stepped back. She reached out with her mind, her body, her bond, but found nothing. Silence. Not the cold kind. The missing kind. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered. She took a step toward him. Say something. He tilted his head. The wind rippled between them. And then he said it. Her name. Aerenya Thornvane. Every syllable deliberate. Not guessed. Remembered. She staggered. What? He stepped closer. I know you. Her heart slammed in her chest. You shouldn't. I do. That's not, she broke off. That's not possible. Sylrien moved until they were a breath apart. You think I wouldn't carve you deep enough? He lifted a hand and gently brushed her temple. I wrote your name into the root of my madness. Her hands shook. You were supposed to forget. He smiled faintly. I promised you I wouldn't. Tears welled in her eyes. But I can't feel you anymore, she whispered. The bond, it's gone. I burned it when I ran. I thought. She pressed a hand to her chest. I thought it would kill me. He took her fingers in his. She didn't resist. But she didn't return the grip. I still remember how you breathe when you lie, he said gently. I remember your voice when you said you'd never let go. I didn't think I could survive this much pain, she said. So I erased the part of me that could still hear you. Sylrien nodded. His thumb traced her knuckles. You're here. That's enough. No, her voice cracked. It's not. He looked into her. Not through her. Not at who she was pretending to be, but at who she always had been. I need you to hurt, he said softly. She froze. What? I need you to feel this. Her throat closed. I can't. Please. He leaned closer. Just once. Hurt for me. She trembled. I'm scared, she whispered. He nodded. I know. I'm scared I'll break. You won't. She bit her lip, hard. What if I do hurt, she whispered. What if I scream and you come running and then you're the one who breaks? His smile faded. Then came back sadder. Then I'll break next to you. She dropped her forehead against his. You remember everything? Every damn piece. But I can't feel anything. I'll hold it for you, he said. Until you do. Aerenya sobbed. One hand clutched his shirt. The other clenched into her side, where the bond used to pulse like a second heart. You shouldn't have done it, she said. He kissed her temple. I couldn't let you be the only one who remembered. She looked up. Eyes swollen. Raw. If I could go back, I'd never have let you love me. Sylrien shook his head. I would have found you anyway. He smiled faintly. In every life. In every war. In every broken vow. A gust of wind passed between them, carrying away the last of the ritual's smoke. She stepped back. And, for a second, it looked like she might run again. But she didn't. She took his hand. Held it to her cheek. I can't promise I'll feel you again, she whispered. I don't need a promise, he said. I need you to still want to. Her lips trembled. I do. From the edge of the glen, Lyra watched. And for the first time, her heart broke for the wrong reasons. Because now she understood. This love was not made of survival. It was made of refusal. Of remembering even when forgetting would have been easier. Aerenya let go of his hand. But her fingers remained near his pulse. Just close enough to whisper, even if she couldn't feel the rhythm. And he, without hesitation, whispered back. I'm still here. Chapter 23, A Name That Cuts. The Shadelock Chapel was built for secrets. Nestled in the belly of the old palace cliffs, beneath layers of stone that remembered coronations, betrayals, and whispered oaths, the chapel had once been a place where princes knelt to bind their blood to the realm. Now it served as a sanctuary no longer sanctioned, forgotten by ceremony, but not by memory. It was here that Aerenya dragged her half-frozen body, her boots caked with dirt and desperation, her eyes red from sleeplessness. Sylrien was already waiting inside. The wind had carved its way through a broken window, pushing pale moonlight across the altar stones. He stood in its center, bare-handed, his coat discarded, shoulders outlined in cold silver like a statue carved from regret. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning. She didn't answer right away. The echo of her footsteps said enough. "You signed your sanity away," she finally hissed. "You etched my name into your mind, why?" He turned. And his eyes weren't sad. They were steady. "You needed to forget me," he said softly. "So I made sure someone remembered." She blinked back fury. "That's not your choice. I'm not asking for forgiveness." She closed the distance between them, fist clenched. "Then what are you asking for, Sylrien? What am I supposed to do with a name that cuts every time I hear you say it?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he raised one hand. "3 seconds ago," he said, "your heart skipped." "What?" "Because you were about to cry, but didn't want to. It'll beat 5 more times before you speak again." She stared at him. And he continued. "You're about to say my name like a wound." She opened her mouth. Stopped. He whispered, "Say it anyway." Her breath shuddered. "You remember my body better than I do," she choked. "You remember the sound of my pain, but I don't feel anything." He took a step closer. "You don't need to." She shoved him. Hard. He didn't resist. She grabbed the blade from his belt, still warm from the press of his hip, and without hesitation, slashed it across her palm. Blood bloomed red down her wrist. He caught it. As he always did. "Let me feel," she hissed. "Please, let me feel you." He wrapped her hand, fingers firm but reverent. "I'm here." "I can't," her voice cracked. "I can't hear you anymore, Sylrien." "You don't need to." "Don't say that." She yanked her hand free. "I'm empty," she screamed. "You talk like I'm still tethered to you, but I'm not. I can't feel your breath, your thoughts, your ache. You're bleeding for someone who doesn't exist anymore." He didn't blink. He didn't step back. Instead, he said, "You're still there." "Where?" she sobbed. "Where am I if I can't find you?" His eyes burned gold in the chapel light. "You're still standing in the second before I went mad." She froze. "What?" "You don't feel me now because I remembered too much. You don't remember me because you gave it all up to save me. But somewhere, before the knife, before the oath, before the gods decided love needed to hurt." He touched her temple. "You're still standing there." She gasped. "I will always remember you in that second," he said. "Even when you don't." Her legs buckled. He caught her. Held her against the stone pews worn smooth by prayer and ash. "I don't know who I am without you," she whispered. "Then let me carry it for both of us." She sobbed into his chest. "I hate you," she choked. "No, you don't." "I can't hate someone who still says my name like a promise." "Then say it back," he breathed. "I can't." "Then cut me, Aerenya. Let me bleed until it sounds like you." She buried her face in his collarbone. And wept. Outside, just beyond the chapel doors, Lyra stood beneath the archway, her fingers trembling. She had followed them. Had watched them collapse into each other, again and again, like stars too tired to orbit. She whispered into the cold. "If your love can only live through pain, through spells, through bleeding names and broken bones." She shook her head. "Then it was never love. It was a curse." Inside, Aerenya pressed her wounded palm to Sylrien's chest. The blood soaked through his shirt. And for one brief second, just one, she thought she heard it. His heartbeat, calling her name. Chapter 24. The Girl Who Can't Feel. The Rift Vault Cradle did not belong to any one kingdom. It belonged to the Pact. Nestled deep beneath the former cathedral ruins, below the lowest crypt, the cradle pulsed like a sleeping heart, a vast chamber of veined stone and rune-lit air, lined with rings of silver chains and bone-thorn conduits. No light reached it naturally. Only the pulse of magic. Old, feral, hungry. Aerenya stood in the center of it, arms wrapped around her own trembling body. She had followed Sylrien here because she'd wanted to believe. "You said this place could fix me," Aerenya whispered. "You said I might feel again." Sylrien stood beside the etched seal, her hands calm, her dress the color of bone-soaked ash. "I did," she said with a serene smile. "And it will." She stepped aside, and the real center of the cradle came into view. A platform, hovering just above the stone, surrounded by a ring of jagged sigils and bloodroot channels. Bound in its core, a tangle of twisted packed thread, still glowing faintly with the remains of resonance once known as empathy. The source root. Aerenya's pulse skipped. Something inside her recognized it. Not intellectually. Viscerally. Like bone remembering pain. "What is that?" "The origin," Sylrien said. "Of all connection. Of all memory. Of the pain you call love." "I don't understand." "You don't have to," came a voice from the shadows. Wheeler stepped out, holding a scroll bound in Thor wire. He unrolled it with precision. The parchment crackled. "I thought it was time you saw this," he said. "The original Thorn line genealogy. The pre-burning one. Before the records were rewritten." Aerenya stared. At the names. At the sigils. At the final, circled entry. Sylrien Iskarreth, bound initiate. Below it, a notation scratched in old runic shorthand, replaced at 5 cycles for strategic alignment. Her lips parted. "No." Wheeler's voice remained quiet. "You weren't meant to bear the pact, Aerenya. You weren't the chosen soul." He walked closer. "You were the spare." The word hit like a blow. Aerenya stepped back. "No, You were put in the fire because she had eyes too bright. Because someone said she was too valuable. Because your name meant nothing in the official halls." She shook her head. Wheeler handed her the scroll. "It was never yours to carry," he said. "But you burned anyway." The paper crumpled in her hands. Her knees buckled. She fell to the edge of the seal. "Then what am I?" Sylrien's voice came smooth as silk. "You are a crack. In a system built to control. A fault line between pain and obedience." Aerenya raised her face. Her voice splintered. "What's the point of me?" Wheeler tilted his head. "To make sure he suffers just enough to never remember why." Aerenya closed her eyes. The seal beneath her lit up. She didn't move. The ritual circle activated before she had time to cry. Silver vines surged up from the platform, wrapping around her wrists, ankles, throat. Not tight enough to bruise, but tight enough to mute. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. The packed root pulsed behind her. Sylrien stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "We will extract your resonance," she said. "And implant Lyra's. The bloodline will reset. The kingdom will balance." Aerenya writhed, but her body refused her. A sedative had been laced into the air. "Don't worry," Sylrien whispered, brushing a lock of hair from Arenya's frozen cheek. "No one remembers a tool." Wheeler folded his hands behind his back. "Some ghosts exist only to remind others of their trespasses," he said. "You were never the storm, Aerenya. Only the silence before it." She tried to scream, but the pact refused her voice. She tried to cry, but the ritual burned the tear ducts numb. All that remained was one sense. Not sight, not sound. Just a vague, aching impression. Somewhere, beyond the stone, in the sky above, someone was crying. A voice she couldn't name. A heartbeat she couldn't feel. But the pain, it felt like it knew her. And she no longer knew herself. Chapter 25, The Alpha Who Wasn't Chosen. The wind screamed around the Crownbreaker steps. Cold stone etched with forgotten vows rose toward the sky like the vertebrae of a buried titan, jagged and splintered with the weight of ages. It was here kings once broke their oaths to ascend, or were broken by them. And now, Sylrien Iskarreth stood at its summit, blood dripping down his fingertips, arms bare beneath his storm cloak, his eyes glowing like shattered stars. He did not kneel. He did not shake. But something inside him was cracking. Below him, a circle of robed figures ringed the lower tiers. And at their head, Wheeler. The High Seer's voice echoed through the icy air, steady, cruel. "The Thorn Pact has reached its limit. The Summoner is corrupted. The link unstable. We begin the final severance." Behind him, the platform hissed. The seal began to glow. She was never meant to carry it, Wheeler continued. The bloodline was forged for another. At his gesture, Lyra stepped forward, wrapped in formal robes of binding white, pale-faced, trembling. But she walked up the stairs, step by step, until she stood beside Sylrien. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she said. His eyes didn't leave hers. "I didn't know it would be you," she whispered. "But I was the one meant to bear it. I was the one chosen. They hid me, and they put her in the fire." Sylrien exhaled, like a man breathing ash. "She survived it," he said. "So tell me, Lyra, how does that make her less?" Lyra closed her eyes. She was never meant to exist inside it. "And yet," he said softly, "she's the only one who could." Wheeler lifted a hand. "Your Highness, if you wish her to live, then let go." Sylrien didn't move. Wheeler continued. "You are the emotional node. The pact flows through your resonance. If you release it, she will be spared the final burn." "I don't want her spared," Sylrien said. His voice was low, a tremor beneath iron. "I want her whole." Wheeler narrowed his eyes. "If you don't let go, you will unravel. You will lose yourself." Sylrien laughed. "Once. Quiet and bitter and real. Then let me. You will forget her." He smiled. "Not if I fall with her name on my tongue." Lyra stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Please," she whispered. "I'll carry the burden. That's what I was meant for." Sylrien turned to her. And for a moment, there was silence. Then, "I never wanted the chosen one." His voice didn't rise. It descended. "I want the girl who built herself out of pain." The words hit like thunder. "She wasn't selected," he said. "She survived. She wasn't forged in prophecy, she was tempered in fire. And she is the only one I would ever choose." Lyra's breath hitched. Tears rolled freely now. "I know," she whispered. Wheeler lifted both arms. "Then you condemn her. You bind her to your fall." Sylrien turned to face him fully, and the light in his eyes shifted, widened, fractured. The first ripple of wolf light coursed through his veins. "I will become what you all fear," he said. His teeth lengthened, claws flexed. "Not because I've lost her." He stepped down one stair. "But because you tried to take her from me." Another stair. Again. The sky rumbled. The seal pulsed. "Then know this," Wheeler said. "When you snap, when you break and forget the line between lover and prey," he pointed toward the mountain's edge, "she will be the first to bleed beneath your claws." Sylrien stopped, lowered his head. The wind carried the sound of his voice like a whispered death. "Then I will die," he said, "before she does." And with that, he turned his back on the summit. And let the madness begin. Chapter 26, The Pact Remade with Ashes. The ashroot core pulsed like a dying lung. Every breath the earth took beneath that chamber came thick with soot and ancient pain. The heart of the pact, the place where every thorn oath had been sealed, where blood first spilled to bind soul to soul, was now blackened by time and burnt offerings. And Sylrien had come to break it. He tore through the outer seals like paper. Warded fire burst around him, biting at his exposed skin, but the wind coiled at his back like a living force. His hair whipped behind him in silver flares. His body was no longer human. The wolf had taken him fully. Not the beast of nightmares, nor the frenzied shapeshift of madness. No, this was the storm given form. Claws dipped in starlight, fangs made of oath iron, veins glowing like fault lines, eyes lit with the full fury of memory unforgotten. And in the center of it all, suspended in the heart of the pack's cradle, Aerenya. Her body floated, limbs limp, wrapped in coils of crimson thread. The cords pulsed with fractured runes, etched in the same language that had silenced her. Her mouth was parted, but no breath came visibly. Her eyes were open, unfocused. He moved to her. The chains recognized him, not as a prince, but as the monster the pact had tried to suppress. And they recoiled. One by one, the tendrils snapped, burning away into ash. Her body collapsed into his arms like a broken doll. But her heart still beat. Barely. "Aerenya," he whispered, lowering them both to the cracked altar floor. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Didn't reach for him with thoughts. Couldn't. But her hand, still trembling, rose slowly and pressed against his chest. Right over his heart. That was all she had left. A single touch. His body, large and feral and burning with too much magic, began to still beneath her palm. And then he did the only thing he hadn't done in years. He knelt. One clawed hand against the stone. The other over hers. "You can't feel me," he whispered, voice rough and breaking. "But I'm still here." No answer. Her lips parted slightly. Still silent. His fingers wrapped around hers. "You not speaking. It breaks me worse than your blade." She blinked. Tears didn't fall. The ritual had taken that too. But she lowered her head. And with slow, shaking effort, she traced her fingertip across his palm. One letter at a time. WILLYOUCHOOSEMEAGAIN. His throat clenched. He exhaled raggedly. Then, in a motion as deliberate as it was sacred, he brought her hand to his mouth. Kissed each word. One by one. I never stopped. He leaned forward. His forehead touched hers. Even in madness. He pressed her hand to his heart again. "You are the only answer I will ever give." Her fingers curled slightly. A tremor through them. And for a split second, something like light, like resonance, flickered between them. Not a connection, but a memory of one. The chamber shuddered. From the broken ceiling above, packed runes began to fracture. The altar beneath them glowed red, then white, then black. From the highest balcony, Wheeler's voice tore through the chaos. "Stop. If you don't sever the bond now, if you don't end this." He was pale. Sweating. Terrified. "You'll take the core with you." He pointed toward the crumbling vortex above. "The pact will implode." Aerenya lifted her gaze. Eyes like cracked mirrors. Sylrien looked only at her. "Then let it," he said. Wheeler shrieked. "You'll die." "I died the first time she screamed my name, and I didn't hear it," Sylrien growled. "And I came back just to hold it one more time." He leaned in. His breath against her lips. A prayer in the dark. "This time, if we fall." His voice broke. "We fall together." She nodded. One slow blink. Not because she could feel him, but because she believed. And as the stone cracked beneath them, as the last ancient spell bled out of the pack's heart, she wrote one last thing across his chest, trembling. IREMEMBER. And the world began to burn. Chapter 27. One last shared heartbeat. The Echo Grave Circle had been buried by time. Once, it had been the cradle of connection, the place where the earliest thorn-blooded wolves first carved emotion into stone and bled memory into the dirt. But that was before the wars. Before the burning of the bloodlines. Before love became a risk and empathy a sentence. Now it stood in ruin, half swallowed by moss and frost, broken sigils worn smooth by centuries of forgetting. And it was here that Aerenya and Sylrien came to feel each other one last time. No guards. No watchers. No pact to bind them. Just pain and will. Aerenya's limbs trembled from the ritual burn, her throat still raw from the silence forced into her body, but she walked. Barefoot. The cracked stone under her soles felt colder than her skin. Sylrien waited at the center, already standing within the old ring of resonance stones. His coat discarded. His eyes dark. His breath shallow. He said nothing. Neither did she. Not at first. Her fingers trembled as she picked up a piece of broken packed glass from the ground. She scratched the words onto the only surface she could reach. His palm. I am willing to remember all your madness. He read the words, then gently curled his fingers around hers. Then I'm willing to die on your lips. She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. He stepped back into the circle's very core, and she followed, barefoot to barefoot, soul to soul. Above them, the final shard of primordial thornstone, the one artifact older than the pact itself, hovered on a rusted chain, pulsing a dull, broken heartbeat. No one had used it in centuries, and none had survived trying without a guide. But they had no one left. Only each other. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded once. The stones beneath them hummed. Their hearts didn't. Not yet. She placed her hand over his chest, her other over her own. His heartbeat was faint. Hers almost imperceptible. The stone above began to spin. Light, no, not light. Memory poured down. Not a ritual. Not a spell. Just a desperate reaching. And then, she gasped. Not aloud. Not physically. But something shifted. Within. Aerenya's lips parted. Her fingers dug into his skin. "I feel you," she mouthed. Sylrien's breath left him like an avalanche collapsing. His arms wrapped around her waist, forehead to hers, his eyes closing as if the moment was too much for even a wolf to bear. "I never stopped being here," he whispered. "Even when you couldn't feel me. I stayed." "I know," she mouthed. "I just forgot how not to be alone." The stone surged. A deep chord vibrated through the air. Her knees gave, and he caught her, lowering them both to the center of the ring. They pressed together, skin against skin, heartbeats finding sync through sheer proximity. Her nails dug into his shoulder. He kissed her, not like claiming, not like apology. Like breathing. And then, a pulse. One single echo. Strong. True. She heard it. His heartbeat. She arched into him. And for the first time in days, weeks, maybe years, she felt him. Not through bond. Not through command. Just through being. "You're here," she gasped. He nodded, hands cradling her face. "I'm yours." The wind shuddered through the broken chapel dome above, the ancient magic holding them flickering at the edges. Time was closing. The stone was dimming. She leaned close, lips to his ear, breath a whisper across the edge of eternity. "Sylrien, don't forget me." His arms tightened. "I couldn't," he whispered. But when he opened his eyes, she was already collapsed against him. Still warm. But her pulse. Gone. The thornstone overhead shattered. And everything fell silent. Chapter 28. The Pulse That Broke the Pact. The silence didn't come gently. It slammed down like a tombstone, sealing Sylrien inside a world where the only thing left breathing was memory. Aerenya lay limp in his arms, her skin still warm, but her soul, her resonance, hollowed out like the inside of a burned bell. He pressed his ear to her chest. Nothing. No rhythm. No tether. No whisper of the girl who once pulled him back from madness with nothing but a breath. But she wasn't dead. Her body still moved with air. It was her soul that had been scraped clean. Her presence, so vivid, so untamed, now vanished into the black seam where the pact had shattered. He knelt with her on the ruins of the echo-grave circle, arms cradling her weightless form, blood from the broken ritual pooling beneath them like a second skin. Her fingertips twitched once. Reflex, not recognition. He took her hand, pressed it to his mouth. "I'm still here," he said. The words fell between them like snow, beautiful, useless, already melting. High above, at the rim of the thornroot skywell, the wind stirred robes and banners alike as Wheeler and Isren arrived, flanked by the last remnants of the Pact's Enforcement Council. Lyra, cloaked in mourning gray, stood at the ledge behind them, watching the circle far below. Wheeler lifted his voice, magnified by old bone magic. "The Thorn Pact is finished," he declared. "The summoner has fallen silent. The resonance is purged. The wolf line is cleared." Isren added, her voice honey-sweet, "Let this be the final piece." Sylrien didn't look up. Not right away. He was still kneeling. Still holding Aerenya as if she were the beginning and end of every vow. But when he finally did raise his head, it was slow, deliberate. And when he spoke, the heir seemed to stop listening to anyone else. "You're wrong." Wheeler narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" Sylrien rose. His arms did not tremble. His back was straight, despite the wolf burn along his spine still bleeding. Despite the trembling of the ground beneath his boots. "She's not gone," he said softly. "She's just not here." He bent, kissed her temple, then turned, walked to the broken altar at the center of the circle, and knelt again, but not for grief. For ritual. He drew a blade from his belt, not steel, but packed bone, carved from the last of the Iskarreth tomb wood. Holding it steady, he bared his back, pulled his hair aside, and began cutting into his own skin. The shape of it. Not runes. Not names. Roots. Veins of memory, spiraling from the base of his spine like a second nervous system. Blood soaked the stone. He didn't flinch. Didn't breathe. He pressed his palm against the altar's core and whispered, "Rebind." The air cracked. Not thunder. Not magic. Something older. Understanding. The wind recoiled. The sky darkened. Wheeler shouted, "Stop him. He's fusing to the core. He'll bind the resonance to himself. You'll drown in it, boy. You'll never be alone again, never free." Sylrien smiled faintly, lips cracked and blood wet. "That's the point." He leaned down, rested his forehead against Aerenya's unmoving chest. "You don't have to feel me," he murmured. "I'll feel for both of us." And then he did what no prince, no wolf, no alpha had ever done. He opened himself. Fully. No filter. No thresholds. No protection from the agony of an entire kingdom's worth of buried grief. The flood hit him like fire. He didn't scream. He simply let go. And poured everything, every breath, every memory, every second he had ever known her, into her. His body began to go still. Not cold. Just quiet. Aerenya stirred. A flicker. A twitch. And then a blink. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and wide and wild. For a moment, all she could see was white. Then, him. Not his face. Not his body. Just the last piece of him she could feel. The pulse. A single rhythm thudding inside her, steady and alien and his. He was inside her chest. Not physically. But his presence, his sense of being, of remembering her, now throbbed beneath her ribs. And in it she heard, for the briefest breath, "She cannot die in silence." Her mouth fell open. Her fingers grasped blindly. But when she looked, really looked, he was already falling. His arms had dropped. His head lolled against her shoulder. Eyes open, but blank. Emotionless. Empty. He had given her everything, and kept nothing for himself. Above, the air shifted. Wheeler's lips thinned. Sylrien whispered, "He did it." He flipped the core. "The fool," Wheeler muttered. He buried himself in her resonance. When she awoke, he vanished. "No," Lyra said quietly behind them. "He didn't vanish. He built a grave out of her memory, and crawled into it." Down below, Aerenya sat in the ashes of the pact. Her arms wrapped around the body of a prince who still looked like he could breathe. But didn't. She placed his hand over her heart. Pressed it there. "Do you feel me now?" she whispered. No answer. Just silence. Tears carved tracks through her blood-stained cheeks. And then she said it again, voice low and broken and raw. "Then I'll feel it for both of us." She stood, slowly, her body trembling from the re-entry into sensation. Her hands glowed faintly. Red. White. Gold. The colors of resonance reborn. She turned. Faced the mountain ledge. Faced Wheeler. Faced Sylrien. And her eyes were no longer blank. They burned. With grief. With memory. With the agony of having loved and been left behind. "Bring me all of it," she said softly. Her voice cracked like lightning across old gods. "All your oaths. All your silence. All your lies." She smiled. Tears still falling. But this time, Her fingers curled into fists. You'll feel what you made him feel. And the pact, once broken, began to burn again. Chapter 29. A heart that echoes, even in silence. The wind no longer howled. It breathed, soft and low, as though mourning the storm it had once carried. The thornroot skywell, once split open by spells and screaming packs, now rested beneath a rare hush, the kind of silence that follows after something immense has broken and something more immense has lived. Aerenya Thornveins stood at the edge of the packed crater, her bare feet blood-slicked, her hands blistered from ritual scorch. But she was standing. He was not. Sylrien Iskarreth lay at the center of the collapsed ring, his body whole, untouched by blade or claw, but changed, marked by sacrifice that no wound could show. He was warm. He was breathing. But his spirit was elsewhere. His eyes were closed, his skin pale, his lashes dark against the bone line of his cheeks. He did not speak. He did not move. Not because he couldn't. Because he had given everything. And she, the girl who could once never feel, felt too much now. Aerenya walked to him. Kneeling, she cupped his face, ran her thumbs beneath his eyes. No tears came. He had no pain left to cry. He had given it to her and, through her, to everyone. You gave them all your love, she whispered, voice rough. Even the ones who wanted you dead. She leaned down, forehead to his. Then let me give them back the part you shouldn't have taken. She rose. Faced the stone that had once broken them. The mirror-wild core still pulsed faintly from beneath the cracked skywell, like a buried heart refusing to die. She reached into her robes and pulled from it the last thorn-blooded shard, the final sliver of packed steel not yet destroyed. With one hand on Sylrien's chest, she placed the shard at her own throat. No words. No chant. Only will. Only love. Pain flared through her, hot and wild and bright. Her memory surged, mother burning, wolves screaming, snow under her back as he kissed her, blood, glass, laughter, silence. And then him. His voice. You don't need to feel me. I'll feel for both of us. Now it was her turn. She opened herself like a door with no hinges and let everything out. Her loneliness. Her rage. Her failure. Her joy. Her love. The sky split open. A pillar of resonance burst upward like a geyser of flame and wind and sorrow. From the cliffs above, Velar screamed as the force hit him. Aerenya didn't look. She didn't need to. She felt every nerve in his body snap from the pressure of relived emotion. His ribcage folded in on itself. His mind boiled under the strain. He didn't even have time to beg. Sylrien turned to run. Too late. A wave of silver ash burst across the upper platform. Her command ring shattered into 1,000 snow-lit motes that spun once around her throat, then flared and detonated. Her scream never reached the ground. The pact system collapsed. Across the lands of the wind-blooded, wolves fell to their knees, not in pain, but in awakening. The chains that had filtered their emotions for generations broke. For the first time, their rage and sorrow and love belonged to them alone. The world was quiet again. But this time, not numb. Just real. Aerenya sank beside Sylrien once more, weak and flickering, a girl stitched back together with flame and memory. Her fingers found his again. One by one, she lifted them into her palm. This one, she whispered, is for the night you reached for me through fire. Another finger. This one is for when you didn't let me walk away. Another. This one is for every heartbeat you gave me when I had none of my own. She looked down at him. His eyes still closed. But his face. It didn't look like death. It looked like peace. You don't remember, do you? She whispered, curling his hand against her cheek. That's okay. She leaned down, kissed the corner of his mouth. I remember enough for both of us. Days passed. The war ended not with fire, but with absence. The pact was gone. The chain broken. No one dared rebuild it. The mere wild ruins were left to heal. And within them, under vines and rebuilt archways, a small structure stood again. Not a tomb. A garden. Lyra sat beneath the veranda, copying names into a new royal record. She had inked generations of lies and blood. But now, when she reached the last page, she paused. Her pen hovered. She could not write his fate. Instead, she wrote, "He left behind a choice." Sunlight streamed through the open archway. She stood, pushed open the last door. Inside the hidden bloom room, Aerenya sat on a stone bench. Her hair was longer now, streaked with silver. In her lap, resting against her shoulder, Sylrien. His head leaned against her. His eyes were closed, his lips unmoving. But his fingers, one twitched. Just once. Like waiting for something. Like listening. As night fell, Aerenya leaned back against the stone. She began to hum. Not a lullaby. A song she'd once heard sung in the courtyards of Windhold, long before she knew his name. A song of storms and promises. The Wind-Blood Elegy. She smiled faintly, still humming. Then paused. Turned her head toward him. "Do you remember the last line?" she asked softly. No answer. She waited. Her hand still wrapped around his. The night deepened. Crickets stirred. Silence settled. And then, his brow twitched. His lips parted. A single word, barely more than a breath. Aerenya. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just smiled. Because this wasn't the end. Not really. Not when he still remembered her name. Chapter 30. The last thorn blooms softly. 3 months had passed. The world did not end. Nor did it begin anew. It simply went on, the way things often do when grief is too large to bury and too small to shout. The pact was no longer law. Across the wind-laced hills of the north, wind-blooded wolves learned to breathe without resonance, to hurt in silence, to cry without sending pain into the minds of others. Their thoughts belonged to themselves now, their emotions unfiltered, raw, messy, real. Velar had died with a scream, his bones burst open by the very rituals he once weaponized. Sylrien had vanished with the last of her name, her banners burned, her bloodline in exile. And in a valley between ash and wildflower, something fragile began to grow. It was called the Silverglen Sanctuary now. Once a forgotten thorn village, burned during the purge, it had grown quiet and green once more. Lavender-pink windgrass swept the hillside, humming when the breeze passed through. No guards. No shrines. No pact. Just the sound of water and the scent of things trying to heal. And in the house of stone near the creek, Aerenya Thornvein waited. She no longer called herself by name. She had stopped using titles, stopped tracing resonance lines or attempting ritual marks. Her hands had not touched ritual bone in months. She no longer read the stars. She no longer bled for augury. But every day, she washed the hands of a sleeping man, brushed the silver from his temples, sat beside his unmoving frame beneath the wooden eaves of the porch, her fingers threading seed by seed into the spring garden's rose. She fed him tea made from crushed moonleaf. She read to him from books no one else remembered. She sang to him, songs not of calling, but of company. And sometimes, in the quiet between waking and dusk, she wrote down her dreams. She wrote about the night he last whispered her name. She never wrote about the day he stopped breathing. Because he hadn't. Not really. His chest still rose and fell. His body warm. His brow occasionally twitched when the wind howled just right. But his eyes never opened. Not since the day he poured his entire heart into hers and left himself behind. He was not gone. But she knew now what gone could mean. It didn't mean silence. It meant no response. Still, she waited. Not in hope, but in ritual. She didn't expect him to wake. She didn't speak to the sky. Didn't whisper bargains to the gods. She simply waited. She tended the soil. She measured the creek's depth after rain. And each night, She laid beside him, her hand finding his in the dark, as if to say, "I'm still here, even if you're not." The storm came suddenly. Spring's last tantrum. Rain tore down from the clouds like a grieving scream, battering the old roof until water leaked through in dozens of places. Wind whipped the garden into ruin, scattering herbs and petals across the floor. She moved fast. By instinct. She didn't panic. She simply dragged his bed mat to the corner beneath the shelter of the stone awning, tucked the blanket around him, and leaned down to press her lips to his temple. "You're still warm," she murmured. "Good." She sat beside him, knees drawn up, arms around them, watching the storm rage. And then, a sound. So faint, it could have been imagined. It wasn't breath. It wasn't the creak of old timber. It was a voice. Whisper soft. Barely more than breath. "You're drifting again." Her head snapped to the side. Eyes wide. She stared at him. His eyes remained closed. His mouth still. Nothing. Not even a twitch. She let out a laugh. Choked. Broken. Pressed her hand to her mouth to stop the sob from escaping. "Even if it's a dream," she whispered, voice hoarse, "say it again." She never heard it a second time. But she didn't need to. Because for the first time since his fall, something inside her moved. Not grief. Not regret. Something quieter. Like the rustle of leaves that have stopped being afraid of autumn. That night, the moonlight fell through the broken rafters, cutting soft silver across the stone courtyard. It touched the corner of the old shrine, where a single vine had clawed its way through centuries of cracked brick. It touched the stone marker set into the garden wall. The etching nearly faded, worn down by rain and wind and time, but still faintly legible. Here bloomed the thorn. Not to wound, but to remember who dared to feel. And somewhere in the garden, beneath the battered rosemary bush, near the old creek, hidden beneath the sigh of moss and root, a thornflower bloomed. Not crimson, not black, but soft, pale gold. A bloom that knew pain, but had chosen not to close. And so the pact ended. And the heart went on. Not loudly, not perfectly, but enough to keep waiting for another name to be spoken. Even if it was only once more. Even if it was in silence.